Oh, Mom, seriously? This old thing?
Yes, this old thing. Now, let's go.
Good to see you, Mr. Henderson. Good to see you. Just a minute, I'll be there.
I saw you. Please, let me help you.
Thank you. I need it.
Mama, I've been waiting for this moment.
Oh, my son.
Wait, what?
The laughter started before I even turned off the engine. "Mom, you really drove that thing here," my son Ryan called across the front plaza of Sterling Facilities Group. He glanced at the executives beside him and smirked. "That Buick is older than half the interns in this building." A few people laughed. I gripped the steering wheel, pretending his words hadn't landed exactly where they did. Then the glass doors behind him opened. William Bennett, Sterling's CEO, walked straight past my son and toward me. Before I could reach for the handle, he opened my car door himself. "Aria Moore," he said, staring at me in disbelief. "I haven't seen you in years." Ryan's smile disappeared. William turned toward the others. "Do you people know who this woman is? Before I tell you what happened next, tell me something. If your own child laughed at you because of what you drove, would you stay quiet, or would you say something? If this story speaks to you, please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love knowing where these stories find you. 3 weeks before my son laughed at my car in front of his office, that old Buick had been sitting exactly where it always sat, on the left side of my driveway, beneath a maple tree my husband planted 27 years ago. It was a silver 2004 Buick LeSabre, though silver was becoming generous. The paint had faded along the roof. There was a thin scratch above the rear passenger wheel where Charles once backed too close to a grocery cart return. The leather on the driver's seat had a crease that no amount of conditioner could erase. But the engine still started on the first turn. And every time it did, I could almost hear Charles saying, "They don't make them like this anymore, Aria." My husband had loved that car. Charles Moore wasn't the kind of man who loved things because they were expensive. He loved things because they worked. Every Saturday morning, weather permitting, he would walk outside with an old bucket, 2 towels, and whatever cleaning product happened to be on sale at AutoZone. I used to stand at the kitchen window with my coffee and watch him. "Charles, it's a car," I would call. "And you're a woman," he would answer. "Doesn't mean I shouldn't take care of you." That usually earned him a dish towel thrown in his direction. We were married 41 years. He had been gone for 6. People tell you grief changes with time. They are right, but not in the way I expected. The sharp pain softens. You stop reaching across the bed in the middle of the night. You learn to cook for one. Eventually, you can hear your husband's favorite song in a grocery store without abandoning your cart in the cereal aisle. But grief leaves fingerprints. Charles's coffee mug remained in the cabinet. His old workbench was still organized exactly the way he left it. And his Buick remained in my driveway. Not because I couldn't afford another car. That distinction would become important later. After Charles became ill, we sold most of Moore Building Systems, the company we had spent nearly 30 years building. Between the sale, our investments, retirement accounts, and several commercial properties we had acquired over the years, I was comfortable. More than comfortable. But I had never understood why having money was supposed to require looking as though you had money. My house in Richmond was paid for. My bills were paid automatically. I traveled when I wanted to. I gave generously to causes Charles and I cared about. And when I needed groceries, I drove a 22-year-old Buick to Kroger. That arrangement bothered exactly one person. My son. "Mom, seriously," Ryan said one Sunday afternoon. He was standing in my kitchen looking through the window toward the driveway. "What, the car?" I followed his eyes. "What about it? You're still driving it." I smiled. "That would explain why it keeps moving." Ryan didn't laugh. "You need something newer. I need something that gets me from one place to another." "It does. It's ancient. So am I." "Mom." That tone. Ryan had developed it somewhere around 40. The tone adult children use when they have decided their parents have become unreasonable simply because they no longer obey them. He was 41 then, tall like Charles though leaner, always perfectly groomed. His shirt seemed permanently pressed, his shoes polished enough to reflect light. I was a senior account director at Sterling Facilities Group, a rapidly growing company headquartered outside Richmond. And Ryan was doing well. At least that was what I believed. He had been talking about an upcoming vice president position for months. According to Ryan, it was the natural next step. He had the accounts, he had the numbers, he had the relationships. What he apparently did not have was a mother with an acceptable automobile. You could get a Lexus, he said. I could. Or an Audi. I could buy a helicopter too. I'd still have nowhere to park it. Why do you always joke when I bring this up? I turned from the sink. Because I don't understand why my car bothers you. It doesn't bother me. I raised an eyebrow. He sighed. I worry about reliability. That sounded reasonable. For about 10 seconds. Then he added, and perception matters. Perception. You know what I mean. No. Explain it. Ryan leaned against the counter. At a certain level, professionally, people notice things. I looked toward the driveway again. People at your office are inspecting your mother's car. That's not what I said. Then what are you saying? He hesitated. Executive presence isn't just about how you perform, it's the whole picture. There it was. Not safety, not reliability, appearance. I studied my son for a moment. Something had changed in Ryan over the previous 2 years. It had happened gradually enough that I hadn't recognized it at first. His suits became more expensive. Then came the new watch. Then the luxury SUV. He and Claire moved from a perfectly lovely 4-bedroom home into a house nearly twice the size because, according to Ryan, their old neighborhood wasn't where clients entertained. I remembered asking him how many clients he planned to entertain in his bedroom. He hadn't appreciated that either. Claire rarely complained. She was 39, practical by nature, and much quieter about money than my son. Sometimes, however, when Ryan talked about another renovation or vacation, I noticed a flicker cross her face. Concern. But I told myself it was none of my business. Ryan was an adult, a successful one, and I was proud of him. That pride made it easier to ignore things I should have questioned. He began using phrases like positioning myself, visibility, leadership optics, executive circle. Once during dinner, he spent nearly 15 minutes explaining why the country club membership was a professional investment. Charles would have laughed himself out of his chair. Charles had conducted some of his best business sitting in diners where the coffee tasted like burnt rubber. My husband believed people remembered whether you kept your word, not what logo was stitched inside your jacket. But Ryan belonged to a different generation, I told myself, a different corporate world. Maybe I simply didn't understand it. That Sunday, he eventually stopped talking about the Buick, or so I thought. 2 days later, he sent me a link to a dealership. 2026 Lexus RX, pearl white. Just look, his message said. I replied with a photograph of the Buick. I did. Mine is still here. He sent back, very funny. It became a running disagreement between us. Except eventually it stopped feeling funny. A month earlier, Ryan had asked me to meet him and Claire for dinner at an upscale restaurant in Short Pump. When I arrived, he was waiting outside. His eyes went immediately to the Buick. You drove this? I looked behind myself as though another vehicle might be hiding there. No, Ryan. I carried it. Mom, please. What I told you, some people from Sterling come here. And he lowered his voice. I'm up for vice president. I know. You've mentioned it once or 47 times. This stuff matters. I looked at my son standing beneath the restaurant lights in a jacket that probably cost more than Charles and I had paid for our first month's rent. Something inside me tightened. Does it matter to you, I asked, or do you think it matters to them? He didn't answer. That should have told me something. Instead, I kissed his cheek and went inside. That was what mothers do too often. We notice the crack. Then we place a picture over it because we don't want to know how far it goes. A week later, Ryan stopped by my house after work. He was unusually distracted answering emails while I made coffee. We talked about Claire, my grandchildren, and an upcoming charity event. Then almost casually he asked, do you ever talk to people from the old business sometimes? Like who? I laughed. What is this, an interrogation? Just curious. I mentioned 2 retired clients and an old supplier. Ryan nodded as though filing the information away. Then he asked about people in healthcare administration. That caught my attention. More building systems had serviced hospitals, medical offices, universities, and commercial buildings across Virginia. I had known hundreds of people during those years. Some were retired, some had moved away. A few had risen very high in their organizations. Why, I asked. No reason. I should have pressed him. I didn't. Then he asked something stranger. Mom, if anyone at Sterling ever asks what Dad did for a living, just say he worked in operations. Okay? For a moment I thought I had misunderstood. Your father did work in operations. I know. He also founded a company. Ryan shifted in his chair. I just mean you don't have to give people the whole history. Why would anyone at Sterling ask? They probably won't. Then why are we discussing it? He picked up his coffee. It's complicated. No, Ryan. It sounds remarkably simple. His jaw tightened. People make assumptions when they think someone had family advantages. I stared at him. Did you have family advantages? That's not what I mean. Your father and I paid your college tuition. I know. We helped with your first house. I know, Mom. Your father introduced you to the man who gave you your first internship. That was 20 years ago. Yes, which is why I'm confused about the version of history we're editing today. Ryan stood. I'm not editing anything. But his irritation told me otherwise. He kissed my cheek before leaving. At the door, he turned back. Just say Dad was in operations, if it ever comes up. Then he walked toward his expensive SUV. I stayed in the doorway long after his taillights disappeared. Across the driveway sat Charles's old Buick. I looked at the faded paint and remembered my husband coming home in work boots grease beneath his fingernails, exhausted after 14 hours because a hospital boiler had failed. Charles had never been ashamed of that man. Neither had I. And standing there in the quiet, I found myself wondering why our son suddenly seemed to be. I learned the version of my family Ryan had been telling at Sterling by accident. Maybe that was why it hurt as much as it did. If he had sat across from me and admitted he was embarrassed by where he came from, I could have argued with him. I could have reminded him who his father was. I could have told him that ambition was nothing to be ashamed of, but shame itself could make a person cruel in ways they didn't notice until much later. Instead, I heard it from someone else. It happened at a charity luncheon in downtown Richmond. For years, I had supported a nonprofit that helped older homeowners with emergency heating and cooling repairs. Charles and I started donating after more building systems became profitable because we both remembered what it was like to have something break when there wasn't enough money in the checking account to fix it. I was standing near the coffee station when a woman approached me. She was perhaps 45 with short brown hair and the confident friendliness of someone who could start a conversation anywhere. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Aria Moore?" "I am." Her face brightened. "I thought so. I'm Natalie Harris. I work at Sterling with Ryan." I smiled immediately. "Oh, how nice. Ryan talks about Sterling constantly." She laughed. "I'm sure he does. We're all hearing about the VP process these days. That sounds like my son. Yo must be incredibly proud. He really built himself from the ground up." The sentence seemed harmless, but something about it caught me. "I'm certainly proud of him," Natalie continued. "Ryan has told us about growing up in a working-class family and watching his parents struggle. I think that's why he connects so well with clients. He's always saying he built everything himself." I kept smiling. Years in business had taught me how to hold my face still while my mind was moving quickly. "Does he?" "Oh, yes. It's inspiring, actually." I thanked her. We spoke for another minute before someone called her away. I remained beside the coffee station holding a paper cup I had forgotten to drink from. Working-class family. That part was true. Charles and I had been working class for many years, built everything himself. That was where the truth began bending. I drove home thinking about our first apartment. It had been above a laundromat on the south side of Richmond, and every Thursday night the pipes rattled so loudly I thought they might come through the wall. Charles was 26. I was 24. He worked for an HVAC contractor during the day and took whatever maintenance jobs he could find after hours. I kept books for a plumbing company, then came home and handled the invoices for the tiny side business Charles was trying to build. Our first office was our kitchen table. I still remembered the green ledger book. We couldn't afford proper accounting software in those days, not that I would have known what to do with it anyway. Charles would come through the door at 9 at night smelling like metal dust and machine oil. I would have invoices spread across the table. "You hungry?" I'd ask. Always. Then we would eat reheated casserole while talking about whether we could afford another service van. There was nothing glamorous about Moore Building Systems. Not at first. We built it one maintenance contract at a time. A church, two small medical offices, a warehouse, then an assisted living facility. Charles understood machines better than anyone I had ever met. I understood people. That became our partnership. He could walk into a mechanical room, listen for 30 seconds, and tell you what was wrong. I could sit across from an administrator who had 3 competing bids and explain why ours was the one they could trust. Eventually, we hired technicians, then supervisors, then office staff. Our contracts became larger. By the time Ryan was in high school, Moore Building Systems was servicing hospitals, office parks, universities, and commercial properties across central Virginia. But success came slowly enough that Ryan had seen both versions of our life. He remembered the small house. He remembered Charles's work boots by the back door. But he also remembered the better years. He remembered vacations we could finally afford. He remembered college without student loans. That part seemed to have disappeared from the story he told Sterling. I called Ryan that evening. "How was your day?" I asked. "Busy. Why, I met Natalie Harris." There was a brief silence. "At the charity luncheon." "Yes. She's in client strategy. She seems lovely." Another pause. "Okay." I could hear him waiting. "She told me you talk about us, sometimes. She said you tell people you built everything yourself." His tone changed immediately. "Mom, it's just a phrase. Is it?" "Yes." I sat at my kitchen table. The same oak table Charles and I bought after we could finally afford furniture that didn't come from a yard sale. Do people at Sterling know about Moore Building Systems? Some probably do. Do they know it was our company? Why does that matter? The defensiveness in his voice gave me my answer. "I'm trying to understand." "There's nothing to understand. You told me to describe your father as someone who worked in operations. He did. You apparently tell your colleagues you came from struggling parents and built everything yourself. I never said you stayed poor forever." I closed my eyes. That sentence hurt more than I expected. This isn't about being poor. Then what is it about the truth? Ryan exhaled sharply. "Mom, corporate environments are complicated. People judge you, and your solution is to give them a version of your parents that makes you look more impressive. That's not fair. Is it?" Inaccurate silence. Finally, he said, "I have to go. Ryan, I have a presentation tomorrow." Then he hung up. I sat alone for a long time. I wasn't angry because my son wanted credit for his accomplishments. He deserved credit. Charles and I had never done Ryan's work for him. I earned his degree. He spent years building accounts. He traveled constantly when his children were young. He worked late. Ryan was talented. That was exactly why I couldn't understand why he needed to erase the help he had received. We had paid every dollar of his college tuition. When he graduated, Charles introduced him to an old client who offered him an internship. Years later, when Ryan and Claire bought their first house, they were short on the down payment. Charles and I gave them $40,000, not a loan, a gift. When their first child was born, I spent nearly 4 months helping with childcare because Claire had complications after delivery. I had never kept score. Parents shouldn't turn love into an invoice. But there is a difference between not keeping score and pretending nothing was ever given. Over the next several days, I began noticing little things. Ryan had removed an old photograph from his home office. It showed Charles in front of the first Moore Building Systems service van, with 8-year-old Ryan sitting on the hood. When I asked about it, Ryan said Claire was updating the room. At dinner one night, Ryan talked about a Sterling executive whose father owned several dealerships. "He'll never get full credit," Ryan said. "Everyone assumes Daddy opened every door." I put down my fork. "Does that frighten you?" He looked at me. "What?" "That someone might think your father opened a door." Ryan's expression hardened. You're still upset about Natalie. I'm asking a question. I earned my career. I know you did. Then why do you keep doing this? Because you seem determined to prove something nobody accused you of. Claire looked down at her plate. That told me she understood more than she was saying. I let the subject drop. But I started thinking about Charles. Near the end of his life, when illness had made sleep difficult, we sometimes talked late into the night. He worried about Ryan. Not because Ryan was unsuccessful, because success seemed to make him more restless. Boy keeps looking at the next rung, Charles once told me. One day he's going to forget there's a ladder underneath him. At the time I told Charles he was being dramatic. Now I wasn't so sure. The call that changed everything came on a Thursday morning. I was pruning roses in the backyard when my phone rang. Ryan. I pulled off one gardening glove. Hello, Mom, are you home? Yes, I need a huge favor. He sounded breathless. What happened? I left a document envelope at your house Sunday. I remembered it. A thick navy envelope had been sitting on the console table near my front door. I have it, thank God. What's in it? Materials for a meeting. I need the originals. When today? I looked at the clock through the kitchen window. Ryan, it's almost 11. I know. The meeting got moved. Can't someone pick it up? I'm already at Sterling and everyone here is preparing. Mom, please. I really need this. Despite everything between us, I heard the stress in his voice. He was still my son. All right. You'll bring it, yes. Thank you. Seriously. He gave me instructions for where to pull up near the main entrance. I showered and changed into navy slacks and a cream blouse. Then I picked up the envelope. As I reached the front door, I stopped. Through the glass, I could see the Buick sitting beneath the maple tree. For the first time in my life, I hesitated before driving my own car. Ryan's comments returned to me. Perception matters. This stuff matters. I could take another car. I had a newer crossover I used for longer trips. Or I could call a rideshare. For one ridiculous moment, I imagined arriving at Sterling in something sleek enough to satisfy my son. Then I looked at the Buick again. I saw Charles polishing the hood on Saturday mornings. I saw him teaching Ryan to check the oil when he was 16. I saw 30 years of work that had paid for college tuition, houses, vacations, and opportunities. Why should I hide any of it? More importantly, why should I participate in my own erasure? I walked outside. I opened the Buick. I placed Ryan's envelope carefully on the passenger seat. Then I turned the key. The old engine came to life immediately. Still here, I whispered. I backed out of the driveway and headed toward Sterling Facilities Group. At that moment, I thought I was simply delivering something my son had forgotten. I had no idea I was about to discover just how much of our family history Ryan had been willing to use when it benefited him, and how quickly he wanted to hide it when it didn't. Sterling Facilities Group occupied 6 floors of a glass and steel building in Innsbruck, just outside Richmond. I had passed the building before, but I had never been inside. Ryan had worked there for nearly 7 years, and somehow there had never been a reason for me to visit. Birthdays happened at restaurants. Family dinners happened at my house or his. Office celebrations were for employees and spouses. Looking back, I wondered whether that had always been intentional. I turned into the circular drive in front of the building at 11:43. The Buick's air conditioner hummed softly while I searched for the visitor entrance Ryan had described. Then I saw him. Ryan stood near the wide stone steps with 5 other people. Rebecca Collins was among them. I recognized her from a photograph Ryan had once shown me after a company awards dinner. 2 men wore suits. Another woman held a tablet against her chest. The 5th person was an older gentleman I didn't recognize. They appeared to be waiting for someone. I slowed. Ryan noticed the Buick. Even from 30 feet away, I saw his expression change. First recognition, then surprise, then embarrassment. He glanced quickly toward the people beside him. I should have kept driving to visitor parking. Instead, Ryan lifted one hand, so I pulled toward the curb. I lowered my window. I have your envelope. Ryan walked toward me, but before he reached the car, one of the men beside him said something I couldn't hear. Ryan looked back. Then he laughed. It was a nervous laugh, the kind people use when they want to control a moment before someone else can. Mom, you really drove that thing here. I stared at him. What else would I drive? He looked toward his colleagues. That Buick is older than half the interns in this building. One of the men chuckled. The woman with the tablet smiled uncertainly. Rebecca didn't. She looked at Ryan, then at me, and I saw discomfort in her face. My hand tightened around the steering wheel. It is strange how quickly humiliation can make you feel small. I was 68 years old. I had buried my husband. I had negotiated contracts worth millions of dollars. I had sat beside employees whose children were sick and found ways to keep their insurance active. I had survived recessions, payroll shortages, lawsuits, hospital rooms, funerals, and 41 years of marriage to a stubborn man I loved beyond reason. Yet one laugh from my son made me feel like an old woman who had arrived somewhere she did not belong. I forced a smile. I promise it won't contaminate the parking lot. The man who had laughed looked away. Ryan's face tightened. Mom, I didn't mean I know. I reached toward the passenger seat. That was when the glass doors behind Ryan opened. A tall man with silver at his temples stepped outside. He was speaking to an assistant at first. Then he looked toward the curb. He stopped. I recognized him almost immediately. Older, certainly. Thinner than I remembered. But the eyes were the same. William Bennett. He stared at me for perhaps 2 seconds. Then he walked down the steps. Ryan turned. William didn't answer him. He came directly toward my Buick. Aria. There was genuine disbelief in his voice. I opened my mouth, but before I could respond, William reached the driver's side and opened my door. Aria Moore. I laughed softly. Well, unless someone changed my name without telling me. His face broke into a smile. My God, I haven't seen you in years. He offered his hand, then seemed to change his mind and leaned down to hug me. How are you? I'm doing well. And Charles? The question came naturally, and I watched recognition follow almost immediately. His smile faded. Oh, Arya. I'm sorry. I heard about Charles. I should have reached out. It was 6 years ago. Still. I should have. You sent flowers. That wasn't enough. It was kind. Behind him, nobody was laughing anymore. I stepped from the Buick. William looked at the car and smiled. Is this Charles as it is? He still had this thing until the end. William touched the roof gently. I remember him driving this to the Hanover project. I laughed. He probably complained about your paperwork the entire way. He complained about everything I did in those days, usually for good reason. Only then did William seem to remember that we had an audience. He turned. Ryan stood several feet away, holding himself very still. William looked from him to me. Wait. Then he pointed between us. Ryan Moore. Yes, I said. William stared at my son. Arya is your mother. Ryan swallowed. Yes, sir. William actually laughed. Not cruelly. In amazement. You never told me that. Ryan forced a smile. I didn't realize you knew each other. Knew each other? William looked toward the others. Do you people know who this woman is? No one answered. I felt heat rise into my face. William, please. But he was already smiling at the memory. 20 years ago, when Sterling was barely more than a handful of contracts and a rented office, Moore Building Systems was one of the most respected facilities companies in this part of Virginia. Rebecca looked at me with sudden recognition. Moore Building Systems. I nodded. My husband and I ran it. William shook his head. Ran it, that's modest. I gave him a warning look. He ignored it. Sterling went through a rough period back then. Very rough. Ryan was watching him closely now. William continued. Several larger companies wouldn't even return our calls. He looked at me. The Moores did. I felt something shift in the group. Not admiration exactly. Attention. The kind of attention Ryan had apparently spent years trying to manufacture. I didn't enjoy it. That surprised me. A younger version of myself might have. But at 68, I had learned that being underestimated was often more comfortable than being displayed. William turned to Ryan. Your mother taught me more about keeping my word than any business school ever could. Ryan's expression was difficult to describe. Shock was there. So was confusion. But underneath both, I saw calculation. That disturbed me more than the laughter had. He was already trying to understand what this new information meant. Not for me. For him. Ryan cleared his throat. Well, Mom never really talks about the old company. I looked at him. That was technically true, but it was not the reason William had surprised him. Ryan had deliberately chosen not to know. There is a difference. William looked toward the Buick, and Charles kept that car all those years. He loved it. Of course he did. Ryan tried to recover the mood. Mom refuses to replace it. I've been trying for years. No one laughed this time. William looked at the Buick again. I wouldn't replace it either. Ryan's smile disappeared. Rebecca lowered her eyes, but I could have sworn she was hiding one of her own. I remembered why I had come. The envelope. I reached into the passenger seat and handed it to Ryan. He took it quickly. Thank you. You're welcome. He glanced at the people around us. Mom, maybe we can have lunch sometime soon. It was such a small sentence, but something about it bothered me. Ryan had been too busy for lunch twice that month. Now suddenly standing beside his CEO, he wanted one. I'll check my calendar, I said. His eyes met mine. He understood. William asked about my life since selling more building systems. I gave him the short version. I told him I still advised a few organizations, maintained some investments, traveled occasionally, and spent more time gardening than any sensible person should. He laughed. You never really retired, did you? I retired from deadlines. That sounds smarter. One of the executives reminded William that they had a meeting. William nodded. Yes, of course. I moved toward my car. Good seeing you. You too. Then William's expression changed. It happened quickly. The warmth remained, but something more serious entered his eyes. Aria. I stopped. Could you give me a call later? Ryan looked up immediately. Is everything okay? William didn't answer him. He reached into his jacket and handed me a business card. My direct number is on the back. I looked at it. Should I be worried? Not worried. He paused. Concerned, maybe. Ryan stepped closer. Concerned about what William looked at him, then back at me. I'd rather speak to Aria directly. The atmosphere changed. Rebecca stopped pretending not to listen. I held the card between my fingers. What is this about William? He hesitated, then lowered his voice. Something came across my desk this week. What kind of something? A proposal? That word meant little to me then. Sterling probably produced hundreds of proposals. But William's next words made the hair on my arms rise. It referenced some relationships from the Moore Building Systems days. I looked at Ryan. His face had gone strangely still. William continued. And your family name appeared in a context I wasn't expecting. Ryan interrupted. I'm sure it's nothing. William turned toward him. I didn't say it was something. The two men looked at each other. There was history in William's expression now, but not the kind he had shown me. This was the look of a CEO evaluating an employee. Ryan looked away first. I put the card into my purse. I'll call you this afternoon. Please do. William touched my arm. And Aria. Yes, it really is good to see you. You too. I got back into the Buick. This time William held the door until I was seated. Then he closed it carefully. As I started the engine, I glanced through the windshield. Ryan was still standing there. He wasn't looking at the Buick anymore. He was looking at me. For years, I had assumed my son wanted distance from our family history because he wanted to prove he could succeed without it. But the fear on his face suggested something else. Maybe Ryan hadn't been trying to leave our history behind at all. Maybe he had been using the parts that benefited him while hiding the parts that didn't fit the man he wanted everyone to see. I drove away with William Bennett's business card in my purse. And for the first time, the laughter in that parking lot was no longer the thing that bothered me most. It was the proposal, the relationships, and the question I could no longer ignore. What exactly had my son been telling Sterling about the Moore name? I waited until I got home before calling William. Part of me wanted to dial his number from the Buick the moment I left Sterling, but I had learned long ago that important conversations deserved a quiet room and a clear head. Charles taught me that. Never negotiate angry, he used to say. Anger makes you hear what you expect instead of what was actually said. So I drove home. I parked beneath the maple tree, carried my purse inside, and put the kettle on. Only then did I place William Bennett's business card on the kitchen table. His direct number was handwritten on the back. For several seconds I stared at it. Then I called. He answered on the second ring. Aria, you knew it was me. I saved your number after you left. That was fast. I've been hoping you'd call. That didn't reassure me. I sat down. All right, William. What exactly came across your desk? He was quiet for a moment. A proposal connected to Atlantic Regional Health Network. I recognized the name immediately. Atlantic operated hospitals, outpatient centers, and medical offices across Virginia and neighboring states. More Building Systems had worked with several facilities that eventually became part of its network. What does Atlantic have to do with Ryan? Quite a lot right now. William explained that Sterling was competing for one of the largest contracts in the company's history. Atlantic was consolidating facilities management across dozens of properties. Maintenance, energy systems, emergency response, compliance coordination. The kind of work Charles and I had built our lives around. What size contract? I asked. Potentially $38 million over the full term. I sat back. Even after years of large commercial contracts, $38 million still got my attention. That's significant. It's transformational. For Sterling, for the division, Ryan works in absolutely. Winning even the primary portion could change our growth projections for years. Now I understood why Ryan had been so consumed by work, but I still didn't understand why William had called me. Where does my name enter this? William exhaled. That's the part I wanted to discuss carefully. I waited. Ryan has been heavily involved in the proposal strategy. That sounds normal. It is. And he's good at what he does, Aria. I want to make that clear. I know my son is good at his job. I'm not questioning his competence. But several internal planning documents reference what's described as more legacy relationships. My fingers tightened around the phone. What does that mean? That's what I wanted to ask you. I have no idea. William continued carefully. The language suggests Ryan has access to long-standing relationships within Atlantic's leadership structure through your family. For a moment I said nothing. Then pieces began arranging themselves in my mind. Ryan asking whether I still spoke to people from the old business. Ryan asking specifically about healthcare administrators. Ryan wanting to know who I still knew. The questions hadn't been random. What exactly has he promised? I don't know that he's promised anything. That mattered. I didn't want to accuse my son of something he hadn't done. William seemed to understand. There's no evidence Ryan offered anything improper. No payments, favors, confidential information, anything like that. Then what concerns you? Expectation. I knew exactly what he meant. In business, expectation could become more dangerous than a direct promise. A person didn't have to say, I can deliver this. Sometimes all they had to do was let everyone believe they could. William continued. One planning document identifies Ryan's family background as a potential strategic advantage. Another mentions access to legacy decision-makers connected to more building systems. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because the language sounded so ridiculous when applied to me. Legacy decision-makers, I know. I grow tomatoes, William. He laughed softly. I remember you negotiating. Don't sell yourself short. That was a long time ago. Not as long as you think. I got up and walked toward the kitchen window. The Buick was visible through the branches. Ryan doesn't know the extent of my current relationships. That's part of my concern, and neither do you. No. Then let me make something very clear. I'm listening. I do know people connected to Atlantic. Some well, some casually. A few I've known for decades. I suspected that. But I cannot award Sterling a contract. Of course. I cannot order anyone to award Sterling a contract. I know. And I have never told Ryan that I would advocate for Sterling. William was silent. Then he said, That's what I needed to hear. The words chilled me. Why? Because I'm starting to think some people inside Sterling have a different impression. I closed my eyes. Not because Ryan had necessarily lied, because I knew my son well enough to imagine how it could have happened. A carefully chosen phrase, a vague answer, A suggestion left uncorrected. Charles used to call it selling the shadow instead of the building. What has Ryan actually said? I don't have every conversation. Tell me what you do have. William described an internal strategy presentation. Ryan had apparently discussed Sterling's regional credibility and referenced historic Moore relationships across Virginia healthcare. In another meeting, someone asked whether those relationships could provide warmer access to certain administrators. Ryan's response, according to William's notes, had been, "I'm confident we can activate those relationships if needed." I sat down again. Activate, I'm quoting the notes. He never asked me. That's why I called. A hot, complicated anger moved through me. Hours earlier, my son had laughed because I arrived in Charles's Buick. Yet somewhere inside Sterling, he had apparently been using the Moore name as a professional asset. The contradiction was almost breathtaking. He wanted the doors our history might open. He simply didn't want anyone seeing the people who had built that history arriving in an old car. Arya, I'm here. I want you to know something else. What this hasn't become a disciplinary matter. Yet. William hesitated. I didn't say that. You didn't need to. He sighed. I don't think Ryan understands the line he's getting close to crossing. I rubbed my forehead. What happens now? Nothing immediately. The proposal is still being developed. Does Atlantic know any of this? Not from me. From Ryan. I have no evidence he's contacted anyone through you. That was at least something. I looked toward the hallway where an old photograph hung on the wall. Charles and me outside the first real Moore Building Systems office. We were both in our 30s. Charles wore work pants and a company polo. I had terrible 80s hair and a folder tucked under one arm. We looked exhausted. We also looked proud. What do you want me to do? I asked. Right now? Nothing. That's an unusual request from a CEO. I'm not asking you to help Sterling win Atlantic. Good. And I'm not asking you to interfere. Also good. I just needed to establish what was true. I understood. William, yes. If Ryan asks you whether we spoke, I won't lie. Neither will I. There was another pause. Then William said, For what it's worth, I'm sorry about what happened outside today. My throat tightened. You heard enough. He was trying to be funny. Humiliation is often disguised as humor. That sentence stayed with me. After we ended the call, I remained at the table. I should have called Ryan immediately. I almost did. Instead, I opened my laptop. I searched my email for his name. Hundreds of messages appeared. Birthday plans, family photographs, questions about taxes, requests for recipes. Then I began searching terms. Atlantic, healthcare, Sterling, contacts. One message from 4 months earlier caught my attention. Mom, do you remember anyone from the old days who ended up with Atlantic Regional? We're mapping the market. Nothing urgent. I remembered answering casually. A few. Why, his reply. Just curious. We're looking at expansion opportunities. Another message appeared from 6 weeks later. Do you still hear from anyone in hospital administration, especially procurement or facilities leadership? At the time, I had listed 2 retired executives and mentioned that I occasionally saw an old colleague named Patricia at nonprofit events. Ryan replied, Good to know. 3 words. I had thought nothing of them. Now I did. Then I found something else. A forwarded document Ryan had sent accidentally among family tax papers several weeks earlier. I opened it. Most of it was corporate language I had no interest in, but halfway down the page one heading caught my attention, Relationship Capital. Beneath it were several bullet points. Industry connections, legacy vendor credibility, regional leadership access, and then more family relationships potential differentiator. I stared at the words. Potential differentiator. That morning outside Sterling, Ryan had looked at my Buick as though it represented everything about his past he wished people couldn't see. Yet inside the building, our surname was apparently valuable enough to appear in a multi-million-dollar strategy. I leaned back and remembered something Charles once told Ryan when he was 17. Never be ashamed of where you came from, son. But don't ever confuse where you came from with something you own. At the time, Ryan had rolled his eyes. Teenagers do that. I wondered whether 41-year-old Ryan had ever understood the sentence. My phone rang. His name appeared on the screen. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I answered. "Hello, Mom." His voice sounded casual. Too casual. "Did William call you?" There it was. "Yes." A pause. "What did he want?" "I think you already know." Silence. Then Ryan laughed softly. "Mom, whatever he said, don't make this bigger than it is." "I haven't made anything bigger. You know how corporate strategy works. I spent 30 years running a company. That's not what I meant. I know exactly what you meant." His breathing changed. "Did William ask you about Atlantic?" "Yes." "And what did you tell him?" "I looked through the window at Charles's Buick." "The truth." Ryan was quiet. For the first time that day I heard something underneath my son's confidence. Fear. Not fear that I had misunderstood him. Fear that I understood perfectly. And that was when I knew the conversation William and I had just finished was only the beginning. Ryan called me again the next morning. I was sitting on the back porch with coffee watching two cardinals fight over the bird feeder when his name appeared on my phone. I considered letting it ring. Then I reminded myself that silence can become its own kind of punishment, and I wasn't interested in punishing my son. I wanted the truth. "Good morning, Mom." His voice was careful. "Did you sleep very well?" "I didn't." "I'm sorry to hear that." Another pause. Ryan was accustomed to me filling uncomfortable silences. "That morning I didn't." Finally he said, "I think we should clear something up." "All right. Whatever William showed you, those are internal strategy documents. They're brainstorming materials. I understand. They're not commitments. I never said they were. And nobody is claiming you control Atlantic." "I'm glad." His frustration surfaced. "Mom, please don't do that." "Do what?" "Answer everything like you're cross-examining me." I almost smiled. Charles used to complain about the same thing. "I'm asking simple questions, Ryan. You're making this sound unethical." "No. I'm trying very hard not to call it anything until I understand exactly what you did." That silenced him. I took a sip of coffee. "Did you tell anyone at Sterling that I would introduce you to people at Atlantic?" "Not exactly." Two words that should make any mother nervous. "What does not exactly mean?" "I said there were relationships we could potentially leverage." "We, the company." "Which relationships, Mom? This is normal business development." "Then answer the question." He exhaled. "Some of the people you know. Did you ask my permission?" "I didn't need permission to mention that my family has industry history." Mentioning history is different from suggesting access. I never guaranteed anything. There it was. The distinction he had built his defense around. No guarantee. No explicit promise. Just enough implication for other people to reach the conclusion he wanted. "Ryan, did you know whether I still had meaningful relationships with the people you referenced?" "I knew you knew people. That wasn't my question." "No." I looked across the yard. "Thank you." "For what?" "For finally answering me." He sounded exhausted. "I'm under a lot of pressure. I believe you. This Atlantic contract is huge. I know, if we win it, the board is going to restructure leadership, and you want vice president. I've worked 7 years for that. I know." His voice softened. "Then why does it feel like you're against me?" That hurt. "I'm not against you, Ryan. It doesn't feel that way. Being your mother does not require me to agree with everything you do. I didn't do anything wrong." "Then you shouldn't be afraid of anyone examining it." He had no answer. After we hung up, I went inside and opened my laptop. I had already found enough to worry me, but worry is not evidence. So I started reading, not hacking, not digging through anything private. I reviewed only what Ryan had voluntarily sent me over the previous months and what William was permitted to discuss. A pattern emerged. 4 months earlier, Ryan asked whether I still knew people in healthcare. 3 months earlier, he asked whether I attended a fundraising dinner where several Atlantic executives were expected. 2 months earlier, he casually asked whether I still exchanged Christmas cards with Patricia Reynolds, a former hospital administrator. At the time, every question had seemed ordinary. Together, they looked like research. Then I found an email Ryan sent me after I mentioned Patricia. "Mom, if I ever needed an introduction, would you be comfortable making one?" My response, Depends what for, Ryan had replied. Nothing specific. Just thinking ahead. I had forgotten the exchange. Apparently Ryan hadn't. Later that afternoon, William called. I've reviewed more of the Atlantic materials, he said. And the language is still vague. That sounds like good news. In one sense. What's the other sense? The ambiguity seems intentional. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Explain. There's nothing that says Arya Moore has committed to opening doors for Sterling. Because I haven't, exactly. But there are repeated references to family-linked access, historical healthcare relationships, and potential warm introductions. So people are being encouraged to assume. That's my concern. I closed my eyes. Has Ryan broken any rule not that I can establish? Then don't manufacture one because he's my son. I wouldn't. I mean it, William. So do I. His answer came immediately. That reassured me. I didn't want revenge. Ryan had hurt me, yes. But humiliation in a parking lot was not justification for destroying a career. What I wanted was much simpler. I wanted my son to stop using truth like clay, stretching it when useful, compressing it when inconvenient. William continued. There's something else you should know. Ryan is good at this job. I know. He doesn't need this. That was perhaps the saddest part. Ryan had convinced himself that he did. That evening he stopped by my house without calling. I opened the door and found him still wearing his suit. Everything okay? Can I come in? Of course. He walked directly into the kitchen. His eyes moved toward the driveway. I still can't believe you drove that Buick to Sterling. I stared at him. Of all the things we could have discussed, that was what he chose. Excuse me, I'm not trying to start something. It sounds remarkably similar to starting something. You know what I mean. No, Ryan. I'm beginning to think I never did. He rubbed his forehead. Yesterday was embarrassing. For whom? For me. The honesty surprised me. Why? Because everyone was standing there. And then William came out acting like you were... He stopped. Like I was what I don't know. Important. His eyes flashed. That's not fair. Neither was laughing at me. I was joking. Everyone laughed. Exactly. It was a joke. No, Ryan. They laughed because you gave them permission to laugh at me. He looked away. I could see he wanted to apologize. For 1 second I thought he might. Instead he said, You could have warned me you knew William. I stared at my son. That sentence clarified more than hours of argument could have. You think that's the problem? I'm saying I walked into a situation blind. You mocked your mother because you thought she was socially insignificant. I did not say that. Then learning I knew your CEO shouldn't have changed anything. His jaw tightened. That's not how business works. No, that's apparently how you work. He stepped back as though I had slapped him. I regretted the sharpness immediately, but I didn't take it back. Ryan picked up his keys. I shouldn't have come. Probably not. He left without saying goodbye. I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to his SUV disappear down the street. For the first time I understood what hurt most. Ryan wasn't ashamed of me because I had failed. He was ashamed because he believed I looked ordinary. And now that he knew I had connections, history, and respect inside the world he wanted to conquer, he was recalculating my value. 3 days later, my phone rang again. This time his tone was warm, almost cheerful. Mom, are you free Friday night? Why? Sterling is hosting a corporate dinner. I nearly laughed. I thought corporate events weren't really my thing. This one is different. How there'll be some board people there, senior leadership, a few clients, and I'd like you to come. I leaned against the counter. Ryan had worked at Sterling 7 years. 7 Christmas parties. 7 annual dinners. 7 years of client events. Never once had he invited me. Why now? Because you know William. There was a pause. Then he corrected himself. I mean because William knows you. That was almost worse. Ryan. What last week you wanted me to describe your father as a man who worked in operations. I explained that. Yesterday you were embarrassed because I arrived in his car. I apologized. No, you didn't. Silence. Then Ryan's voice softened. Mom, I'm trying here. I wanted to believe him. Every mother wants to believe the best interpretation of her child. Maybe he wanted to repair things. Maybe the dinner was an olive branch. Or maybe Ryan had simply discovered that the mother he had been hiding might be useful in a room full of executives. What time, I asked. 7. Where the Jefferson Hotel. I knew it well. All right. His relief was immediate. Great. I'll send you the details. After we hung up, I remained by the kitchen counter. My eyes drifted toward the framed photograph of Charles. I was smiling the way he always did when he knew something I didn't. What I whispered. Of course, the photograph didn't answer, but I could almost hear him. Watch what people do when they discover you have something they want. Friday evening. I dressed carefully, not extravagantly. A dark blue dress, pearl earrings Charles gave me on our 30th anniversary, and comfortable black shoes. I drove my newer crossover. Not because Ryan had won. The Buick's fuel gauge had been acting strangely, and I had an appointment with the mechanic Monday. Still, when I parked outside the Jefferson, I wondered whether Ryan would notice. He did. He was waiting near the entrance. His eyes moved briefly toward my car, then toward me. And he smiled. Not the embarrassed smile from Sterling. This one was proud, too proud. He kissed my cheek. You look great, Mom. Thank you. Then he placed a hand lightly behind my back and guided me toward the ballroom. Come on, he said. There are some people I really want you to meet. As the doors opened, I saw William across the room. Rebecca stood nearby. Several Sterling executives were gathered around them. Ryan straightened his jacket. And suddenly I understood. For years my son had wanted to keep the Moore family history out of sight. Now he was about to put me on display. The only thing that had changed was that he had discovered my past might be useful. I walked into that ballroom, knowing one thing with absolute certainty. If Ryan expected me to become another carefully chosen line in his Atlantic proposal, he was going to be disappointed. The Jefferson Hotel had always been one of those places where Richmond seemed determined to remember its own importance. High ceilings, marble columns, crystal chandeliers, staff who could replace a dropped fork before it finished making noise. Charles hated events there. The first time we attended a business dinner in that ballroom, he leaned toward me and whispered, Aria, there are 6 forks at this table and I don't trust any of them. I had laughed so hard I nearly spilled my wine. Standing there years later without him, I suddenly missed that irreverence more than I could explain. Ryan kept one hand lightly behind my back as he guided me through the room. There's someone I want you to meet. That seems to be the theme tonight. He either missed the meaning or chose to. The first person was a Sterling board member named Thomas Keller. Tom, Ryan said brightly, This is my mother, Aria Moore. Keller's eyebrows rose. Moore, Ryan smiled. Yes, Moore Building Systems. The pride in his voice was unmistakable and astonishing. 3 weeks earlier, he had asked me to reduce his father's life to operations. Now our surname had become an introduction. Keller shook my hand. I remember Moore Building Systems. You had quite a reputation in healthcare facilities. We worked hard. Ryan says you were one of the pioneers of regional facilities management. I turned slowly toward my son. He smiled. Pioneer. That was new. I don't know about pioneer, I said. Mostly I spent 30 years answering phone calls from people whose air conditioning systems stopped working at the worst possible moment. Keller laughed. Ryan didn't. We moved on. At the next group, Ryan introduced me to 2 senior executives. Again, he emphasized Moore Building Systems. Again, he mentioned healthcare. Again, he made sure they understood that I had handled major client relationships. It was like watching someone polish a piece of silver they had recently tried to hide in a drawer. I began counting how many times he said my last name. 7 in 20 minutes. Rebecca Collins approached while Ryan was speaking with another executive. She wore a simple black dress and carried a glass of sparkling water. Mrs. Moore. Aria, please. Rebecca. I recognized you from Ryan's company photograph. She smiled. I'm surprised he showed you one. There was no malice in her voice. Still, I heard something underneath it. You and Ryan are competing for the same position. Her expression became cautious. I wouldn't describe it quite that way. My son does. That sounds more like Ryan. I laughed. Rebecca glanced across the room toward him. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about the parking lot. You don't owe me an apology. I know. But it was uncomfortable. For both of us. She hesitated. I didn't know your background. Apparently very few people here did. Rebecca met my eyes. That seems to be changing quickly. There it was. Confirmation. I liked her immediately. Before I could respond, Ryan appeared. Rebecca stealing my mother already, just introducing myself. Ryan put his hand on my shoulder. Mom, William wants to say hello. William was standing near the head table. When he saw me, his smile seemed genuine. Arya, I'm glad you came. Ryan was persuasive. William's eyes moved briefly toward my son. I'm sure he was. That small pause told me he understood exactly what was happening. To his credit, William did not embarrass Ryan. He asked about my garden. We discussed a mutual acquaintance who had recently retired. Nothing about Atlantic. Nothing about contracts. Ryan waited. I could feel him waiting. Eventually, another executive joined us. His name was Douglas Pierce, Sterling's chief strategy officer. After introductions, Douglas said, Arya, I understand you spent quite a bit of time in healthcare facilities. More than I care to remember. He laughed. Then you probably know half the people we're trying to meet. Ryan stepped in before I could answer. Mom still knows everyone. The sentence came out smoothly, confidently, almost casually. But now I understood how he did it. He didn't say I had promised anything. He didn't say I could influence Atlantic. He simply placed an implication in the room and allowed everyone else to pick it up. I looked at Douglas. I know people, I said. That doesn't mean I control them. The silence lasted perhaps 2 seconds. It felt much longer. Douglas nodded. Of course. Relationships are valuable. I continued, but people making decisions at that level generally prefer to make their own. Absolutely. Ryan's hand disappeared from my shoulder. William looked down at his glass. I suspected he was hiding a reaction. Douglas excused himself a few minutes later. The moment he was gone, Ryan leaned toward me. Can I talk to you? Certainly. He led me toward a quieter corridor outside the ballroom. The smile vanished. What was that? What was what? You know exactly what I mean. I answered his question. You made it sound like I was claiming something ridiculous. Where you know, then there shouldn't be a problem. Ryan lowered his voice. You didn't have to correct me like that in front of William. I corrected an assumption. Nobody assumed anything. Ryan, I ran a business for 30 years. Please don't insult me. His jaw tightened. This is exactly what I was worried about. I stared at him. What you were worried about? Yes. What specifically? That you wouldn't understand how these conversations work. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, why did you invite me tonight? His eyes shifted. I wanted you here. You've worked at Sterling 7 years. So how many corporate dinners have you attended? I don't know. More than one, obviously. And how many times have you invited me? That's not fair. It's a number, Ryan. He looked away. Things are different now. Yes. I waited. He didn't continue. So I did. 3 weeks ago you asked me not to tell people what your father actually accomplished. That isn't what I said. You laughed at his car in front of your colleagues. I told you it was a joke. Tonight you've introduced me to half this ballroom as though I should have my biography printed on the menu. Because I'm proud of you. The words came too quickly. I felt something break inside me. Not love. A mother's love is harder to break than people imagine, but trust can crack quietly. I stepped closer. Which version of me embarrasses you, Ryan? He frowned. What? The mother with the old Buick mom, or the woman whose name might help your career? His face changed. For once, Ryan had no immediate answer. That's cruel. No. Cruel was making your mother into a punchline because you thought her car made you look unsuccessful. I said I was sorry. You still haven't. He opened his mouth, then closed it. People passed at the far end of the corridor. Music drifted through the ballroom doors. Ryan looked tired suddenly. Not polished. Not executive. Just tired. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Then explain it. This promotion changes everything. Why, it's not just a title. I know. The salary, the bonus structure, the leadership track. If Atlantic comes through and I'm the one who helped position us for it, I'm almost guaranteed to move up. Almost. That's how these things work. And what exactly do you expect me to do? His silence answered before he did. I'm not asking you to do anything inappropriate. That wasn't my question. He ran a hand over his face. A few introductions wouldn't hurt. To whom? People you already know. At Atlantic or connected to Atlantic? I stared at him. There it is. What the thing you've been avoiding saying. I'm asking for an introduction, Mom. People do it every day. Yes, they do. Then why are you acting like I'm asking you to bribe someone? Because you've already told your company those introductions were available before asking whether I would make them. His eyes hardened. I never guaranteed that. You keep saying that as though it makes me feel better. It should. It doesn't. Ryan turned away. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he said something that changed the conversation. After everything you and Dad gave me, don't you think helping me get this one thing is reasonable? I stared at the back of his head. There was no anger in his voice now. That was what frightened me. He genuinely believed it. After everything we gave you, Ryan turned. That came out wrong. No. I think it came out exactly right. That's not what I meant. Then tell me what you meant. You paid for college. You helped with the house. Dad helped me get started. You've always wanted me to succeed. I still do. Then why stop now? The question settled between us. Why stop now? As if help had become a contract. As if every door Charles and I had opened created an obligation to open the next one. As if love were a ladder we were required to keep extending indefinitely. I felt suddenly exhausted. I'm going home. Mom, I've heard enough. You're overreacting. Perhaps. I turned toward the ballroom. Ryan followed me. Are you going to talk to William? I'm going to say goodbye to him. About Atlantic, I stopped. There it was again. Fear. Why does that worry you? It doesn't. Then stop asking. William was near the ballroom entrance. He saw my face and didn't ask questions. Leaving already, I think I've had enough corporate networking for one evening. He smiled gently. I remember you surviving worse. So do I. Ryan stood several feet behind me. William glanced toward him, then back to me. Good night, Arya. Good night. I drove home through quiet Richmond streets. By the time I reached my house, anger had faded. What remained was sadness. Inside, I removed my pearl earrings and placed them on the dresser. Beside them was a photograph of Charles taken during the final year of his life. Looking at him brought back a conversation I hadn't thought about in years. He had been sitting in his recliner thinner than I wanted to admit, watching Ryan's new car pull away from our driveway. Then Charles said something strange. Arya promised me something. Don't let what we built become proof to that boy that he deserves what he hasn't earned. I had scolded him. Charles. I mean it. At the time, I thought illness had made him overly worried. Now, standing in my bedroom 6 years after his death, I remembered something else. A letter. Near the end, Charles had written several letters and placed them with our estate papers. I had read most of them after the funeral, but one envelope had been marked only with my name and the words, "When you need this." I had never opened it. I walked downstairs. At the back of my study stood a small fireproof safe. I entered the code, opened the door, and pulled out the folder containing Charles's personal papers. The envelope was still there. Arya, when you need this. I sat at the desk with it between my hands. For 6 years I had believed I wasn't ready to read whatever my husband had left inside. That night, for the first time, I wondered whether Charles had been waiting for exactly this moment. For several minutes, I did nothing but hold Charles's envelope. The paper had yellowed slightly along the edges. My name was written across the front in his handwriting, large, uneven letters that leaned forward as though even his pen had always been in a hurry. Arya, when you need this. Charles had never been much of a letter writer. Birthday cards usually contained 4 words. Love you, always have. Anniversary cards were not much better. Still here. Still lucky. That was Charles. He could negotiate with contractors for 6 hours, diagnose a failing compressor by sound, and explain an entire mechanical system on the back of a napkin. But ask him to write about his feelings and suddenly the English language became unavailable. Near the end of his life, however, that changed. Cancer has a cruel way of making people understand that eventually there will be no more time to say the things they assumed could wait. He wrote letters to Ryan, to Claire, to our grandchildren, and several to me. I had read all but this one. I slid my finger beneath the flap. Inside were 3 handwritten pages. The first sentence made me smile. Arya, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead, which means for once you can't interrupt me. I laughed. Then I cried. It happened so quickly I didn't even have time to resist. Oh, Charles. I wiped my eyes and continued. He wrote about our marriage, the business, the mistakes we had made. He reminded me of the year more building systems nearly collapsed because we expanded too quickly. He reminded me how we had mortgaged the house when Ryan was 9, how terrified we had been. Then the letter changed. There's something I've been worrying about, and I know you think I'm too hard on the boy. I stopped smiling. Charles had written the letter 7 years earlier, about a year before his death. Ryan would have been 34. I continued. Ryan is smart. Smarter than I was at his age. He works hard. He loves his family. Don't ever mistake what I'm about to say for me thinking he's a bad man. But he's starting to measure himself by rooms he hasn't entered yet. I read that sentence twice. Then again. Charles described things I remembered but had dismissed. Ryan becoming increasingly interested in who Charles knew. Ryan asking for introductions. Ryan comparing himself to friends with wealthier families. One incident returned to me clearly. Ryan had been trying to land a position at another company. He asked Charles to call one of the executives. Charles refused. They argued. Eventually I made the call instead. Ryan got the interview. I didn't get that particular job, but the introduction helped him make contacts that later benefited his career. At the time, I thought I was helping. Charles had seen something else. Every time we moved something out of his way, Arya, he learns the obstacle shouldn't have been there. My chest tightened. I kept reading. Help him when he needs help. That's what family does. But don't confuse helping him stand with carrying him where he wants to go. I leaned back in the chair. Outside the house was silent. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. A car passed somewhere beyond the windows. For a moment, I could almost hear Charles breathing beside me. Then I reached the part that broke me. What we built belongs to us until we decide otherwise. Our money, our reputation, our relationships, our name. Ryan is our son, but being our son doesn't make every door we opened his door. I covered my mouth. The words could have been written that afternoon. Charles had never known about Atlantic. He had never known Ryan would one day work at Sterling. He certainly had never imagined our son would use the phrase, more legacy relationships, inside a corporate proposal. But he had understood the pattern, and I hadn't. Or perhaps I hadn't wanted to. That realization hurt more. Because Charles hadn't been the only parent who helped create the problem. I had. Whenever Ryan struggled, I stepped in. When he needed an internship, we made calls. When tuition increased, we paid it. When he and Claire were short on their first down payment, we covered the difference. When their first child was born and they were overwhelmed, I practically moved into their house. None of those things were wrong. Love is not wrong. Generosity is not wrong. But somewhere along the way, I had stopped asking whether my help was helping. Sometimes I offered before Ryan even asked. I wanted his road smoother than ours had been. What mother doesn't? I thought protecting him from struggle was love. Charles had worried we were teaching him something else. That if a door remained closed, eventually, his parents would find a key. The final paragraph was shorter. If there ever comes a day when Ryan asks you to use what we built to give him something he hasn't earned, please remember this. Letting your child face a closed door isn't abandoning him. Sometimes it's the only way he learns how to knock. I lowered the pages. For a long time I cried. Not dramatically. There was no collapse, no screaming. Just the quiet grief of a widow discovering that her husband had reached across 6 years to tell her something she finally understood. I should have listened, I whispered. Then I heard Charles's voice in my memory. You always were stubborn. That made me laugh through the tears. I folded the letter carefully. I did not feel angry anymore. That surprised me. I felt clear. Ryan had asked me to help him get this one thing. But it was never one thing. There would always be another promotion, another contract, another room, another person he believed he needed to impress. If I made the Atlantic introductions now, what exactly would I teach him? If I made the Atlantic introductions now, what exactly would I teach him that he had been right, that our relationships were his assets, that all he needed to do was create enough pressure, and eventually his mother would provide the access he had already implied existed? No. For the first time, the answer inside me was uncomplicated. No. I placed Charles's letter on the desk. At that exact moment, my phone rang. The sound startled me. William Bennett. I looked at the clock. 9:17 p.m. William had never called me that late, I answered. William Aria. I'm sorry about the hour. What happened? I just finished reviewing the latest Atlantic proposal materials. I sat straighter. And there's language I need to verify with you. I glanced at Charles's letter. Go ahead. William sounded uncomfortable. That's why I'm calling personally. William. All right. I heard papers moving on his end. There's a section outlining competitive advantages. I assume Sterling has several. We do. Then why am I involved? One bullet references regional institutional knowledge. That sounds reasonable. Another references historical vendor credibility. Also reasonable. Then he stopped. What does the next one say? He exhaled. Strategic relationship leverage through more family legacy connections. I closed my eyes. There it was. Not an email. Not casual conversation. Not brainstorming. Proposal language. Is Ryan's name attached? He contributed to the section. That wasn't my question. Another pause. Yes. I looked down at Charles's handwriting. Our reputation. Our relationships. Our name. What exactly does Sterling believe those words mean? That's what I'm trying to determine. Does the board believe I've agreed to make introductions? Some people appear to believe access is available, because Ryan told them I can't establish exactly how that expectation formed. Careful answer. Responsible answer. I respected him for it. Has anyone contacted Atlantic using my name? Not that I know of. Good. Arya, I need to ask you something directly. I know. He paused, then asked the question. Did you authorize Ryan to use your name or your relationships in connection with this proposal? 6 years earlier, I might have protected him instinctively. Even 6 weeks earlier, I might have softened the truth. I might have said Ryan probably misunderstood me. I might have found language that shielded him from consequences. That was what I had always done. But Charles's letter sat beneath my hand. Sometimes it's the only way he learns how to knock. No, I said. William remained silent, so I made it clearer. I never authorized Ryan to represent that I would provide access to anyone at Atlantic. All right. I never promised introductions. Understood. And I have never told Ryan he could use my relationships as leverage in Sterling's proposal. William exhaled slowly. Thank you. I hated those words. Not because William had done anything wrong, because I understood that my answer mattered. What happens now? I need to discuss the language with our leadership team. Is Ryan in trouble? I don't know yet. My maternal instinct surged immediately. William, I don't want him fired. I know. He's made a mistake. I know. He's also worked hard for Sterling. I know that too. I almost continued. Almost started building Ryan's defense. Then I stopped. Charles's letter was still beneath my hand. William said gently, Arya, you don't need to solve this tonight. That sentence landed harder than he could have known. Solving things was what I did. For employees, for clients, for Charles, for Ryan, especially Ryan. What do you need from me? I asked. Nothing. Nothing, just the truth. I looked at the letter. You have it. After we hung up, I returned the pages to their envelope. But I didn't put it back in the safe. I placed it in the top drawer of my desk, close enough to reach. Then I turned off the lights and went upstairs. I expected Ryan to call that night. He didn't. He called at 7:06 the next morning. I was making coffee. His name appeared on my screen. I answered, "Good morning." There was no greeting. "What did you tell William?" His voice was tight. I put down the coffee scoop. "The truth. Mom, I need you to understand what you just did." "No, Ryan." My voice was calmer than I felt. "I think it's time you understand what you did." Silence. Then he said something I had never heard from my son before. Not anger, not irritation, fear. "Mom, the board is asking questions." I closed my eyes. For decades, whenever Ryan sounded afraid, every instinct inside me had screamed the same command. Help him, fix it, make the call, open the door. But that morning, Charles's words were stronger. So I stood alone in my kitchen listening to my frightened 41-year-old son breathe on the other end of the line. And for the first time in his life, I did not reach for the handle. "The board is asking questions." Ryan said it as though the board itself were a natural disaster moving toward him, and I had somehow changed the weather. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone. "What questions?" "You know what questions. I'd rather hear it from you." He let out a sharp breath. "They want clarification about the relationship strategy in the Atlantic proposal." That sounds reasonable. Reasonable? Yes. Mom, they pulled me out of a client prep meeting yesterday. "And what did you tell them the truth?" I almost smiled at the irony. "Good. This isn't funny. I didn't say it was. They asked whether you had agreed to make introductions, and I said we had discussed your network." That was carefully worded. "Did you tell them I agreed?" Silence. "No, because I didn't." "I know." "Then where is the problem?" "The problem is that William called you directly. Because my name was in the proposal. You could have told him we'd talked. We had talked. You know what I mean." "Yes, I did." Ryan wanted me to make uncertainty sound like authorization. He wanted me to take several casual conversations and turn them into an implied commitment. "Ryan, what exactly did you expect me to tell William that we'd discussed introductions?" "We discussed the possibility of an introduction once months ago." I asked what for. "You said nothing specific." I was thinking ahead. "You were building a proposal. I didn't know Atlantic would become this big, but when it did, you still didn't come back and ask me." His voice rose. "Because I didn't think I needed a notarized permission slip from my mother to mention my family's professional history." "You didn't." "Exactly. You needed permission to suggest my relationships were available to Sterling." "That's semantics." "No. That's consent." The word stopped him. I hadn't planned to use it. But once I did, I knew it was right. My reputation belonged to me. My relationships belonged to the people who had spent decades building them with me. Ryan, being my son, did not automatically give him access to either. "I have to go," he said. "Ryan." "What?" "Answer one thing honestly." "What?" "If I had never known William Bennett, if I were exactly the woman you thought I was when you laughed at my Buick, would you have invited me to that corporate dinner?" Silence. Long enough to hurt. "I have to go." The call ended. I stood there staring at the phone. That was my answer. Later that morning, William called. He sounded more formal than usual. "I wanted to update you." "All right. Our board has asked Ryan to explain the wording in the Atlantic materials." "Is this disciplinary?" "Not at this stage." "What does that mean?" "It means we're establishing facts." I sat at the kitchen table. "William, I need to say something." "I'm listening." "I don't want special treatment for Ryan because he's my son." "I understand. But I also don't want harsher treatment, because you know me." "I understand that too. I mean it." "So do I." His answer was immediate. Then he added, "And I want you to understand something. You have no responsibility for what happens internally." Every mother knows how impossible that sentence is. We feel responsible for everything. The first fever, the first broken heart, the failed exam, the bad marriage, the missed promotion. Even when our children are 41, some part of us still believes we should be able to stand between them and pain. But I had Charles's letter. And I was beginning to understand that sometimes standing between your child and pain only ensures they never learn what caused it. What do you need from me? I asked. Nothing. No calls. No. No statements. Not unless the board asks. And Atlantic. Please don't contact anyone on Sterling's behalf. I wasn't planning to. Thank you. I almost laughed. I'm also not contacting anyone against Sterling. I know. That distinction mattered to me. I would not save Ryan. But I would not sabotage him either. No revenge. No whispered phone calls. No using my history to close the same doors he had hoped I would open. I would simply step away. Ryan would have to stand on what he had actually done. 2 days passed. Then 3. On Friday afternoon, he appeared at my front door. He looked terrible. Not physically ill, unraveled. His tie was gone. His shirt collar was open. There were dark circles beneath his eyes. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He walked into the living room but didn't sit. They postponed the promotion interviews. I'm sorry. Are you? Yes. He laughed bitterly. That's hard to believe. Why? Because you could fix this. There it was. Not eventually. Immediately. You still think that? William respects you. That has nothing to do with your conduct. It has everything to do with it now. No. You could call him. And say what? That this was a misunderstanding. Was it? Ryan looked away. You could say I had reason to believe you'd help. Did you? You always help. The sentence was so simple that it almost broke my heart. You always help. Not you promised. Not we agreed. You always help. I suddenly saw the entire problem in 5 words. Sit down, Ryan. I don't want to sit. Then stand. He glared at me. I remained calm. You assumed I would help because I always have. That's what families do. Sometimes. So now you're teaching me a lesson, no? It sure feels like it. I'm refusing to lie. Nobody asked you to lie. You want me to tell William you had authorization you never received. I want you to explain context. The context is that you counted on me before asking me. His face reddened. You're sabotaging my career over a stupid joke about a car. No. Yes, you are. I didn't sabotage anything. I simply refused to lie for you. He stared at me. For several seconds, the only sound was the ticking clock above the fireplace. Then Ryan sat down. Not gracefully. He dropped onto the sofa and covered his face with both hands. When he spoke again, the anger was gone. If I lose this promotion, I'm in trouble. Something in his voice changed me immediately. Not my decision. My attention. What kind of trouble? He shook his head. Ryan. We planned around it. Around what? The promotion. I sat across from him. You planned what? Our finances. My stomach tightened. Explain. He leaned back. When the VP position opened, I knew I had a strong shot. That isn't income. I know that. Apparently you didn't. He flinched. I softened my tone. What did you do? Ryan looked toward the window. We refinanced when we renovated the kitchen. I waited. The SUV lease is higher than I told you. How much higher? That's not the point. It might be. He ignored me. Private school tuition increased. I know. The country club initiation fee went on a card. I stared at him. You financed a country club membership. It matters for work, does it? He looked angry again, but only briefly. We also booked the family trip to Italy for next spring. Cancel it. We'll lose deposits. Lose the deposits. You don't understand. Then help me. His shoulders sagged. The VP salary would cover everything. Will. If I get it. And if you don't. He didn't answer. I thought of Claire's face at dinners. The concern I had seen. The silence. Does Claire know she knows most of it? Most, Mom, please. How much debt? I don't know exactly. That frightened me more than any number could have. You don't know. I'd have to add it up. I sat back. For the first time, the expensive suits, the SUV, the larger house, the country club. All of it stopped looking like success. It looked like scaffolding. A structure built around an image Ryan was terrified to lose. He stood again. If I don't get this, everything starts collapsing. What does everything mean? My career, the house, the kids' school. Claire. Your marriage. He looked away. We've been fighting. My heart hurt for him. I wanted to reach across the room. I wanted to tell him I could cover the credit cards. I could help with the mortgage. I could call William. I could call people at Atlantic. I could make several problems disappear before dinner. And that was precisely why I could not. Because Charles had been right. Every time we removed an obstacle, Ryan learned the obstacle should never have existed. If I lose this, he whispered, I lose everything. I looked at my son. The frightened boy was still inside the 41-year-old man. But I could no longer parent the boy while ignoring the man. Then maybe I said gently, we need to talk about what everything actually means. His eyes filled though he blinked the emotion away. You could help me. I am helping you. He laughed bitterly. This is your idea of help, yes. How? By not making one more phone call that teaches you someone else will always protect the life you built beyond your means. Ryan stared at me. Then he picked up his jacket. At the door he stopped. I hope you're right. So do I. He left. I watched through the window as his luxury SUV disappeared down the street. For the next 4 days I heard nothing. Then William called. The board wants to meet with you. My stomach dropped. Why? To clarify the history between Moore Building Systems and Sterling. I already told you what I authorized. This is about something else. What William was quiet for a moment. The board wants to understand why the Moore name carries so much weight with me personally. I looked toward the photograph of Charles. And why does it? William's answer came softly. Because there's something Ryan apparently doesn't know about how close Sterling came to disappearing 20 years ago. I stopped breathing for a second. Then he added, and what you did to keep that from happening. The board meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 in the morning. William called me the night before to confirm. You're only being asked to clarify history, he said. Nothing more. Does Ryan know I'm coming? There was a pause. No. I looked across my bedroom toward the chair where I had laid out my clothes. Why not? Because I don't want anyone preparing answers around your presence. That sounded reasonable from a CEO. It sounded terrifying from a mother. William, I won't participate in an ambush. It isn't one. It may feel like one to him. I understand. Do you? Yes. And if the discussion moves into Ryan's conduct, you won't be asked to participate. That mattered. I agreed. The next morning I stood in front of my closet longer than necessary. For one ridiculous moment I considered whether Ryan would approve of what I wore. Then I almost laughed. I chose charcoal slacks, a pale blue blouse, and the navy jacket I had owned for 11 years. And I drove the Buick, not as a statement. The fuel gauge had been repaired Monday, and the mechanic told me the old car was still perfectly safe. That was enough for me. At Sterling, I parked in visitor parking instead of the circular drive. William's assistant met me in the lobby. The elevator ride to the 6th floor was quiet. When the doors opened, she led me down a hallway lined with photographs of Sterling projects. Hospitals, university buildings, corporate campuses, manufacturing facilities. I stopped at one photograph, a large medical complex in Hanover County. I recognized it. Charles had complained about that project for nearly a year. Everything okay? The assistant asked. Yes. I looked at the photograph again, just remembering. The boardroom doors were closed. William stepped into the hallway a moment later. Aria. William. You already know. He smiled faintly. Fair answer. Then his expression became serious. One more thing. This isn't about embarrassing Ryan. I know. We're trying to establish whether his judgment is appropriate for senior leadership. That sentence hurt, but it was honest. William opened the door. 8 people sat around a long table. Rebecca wasn't there. This was not a competition meeting. It was something more serious. Then I saw Ryan. He was seated near the far end. His face changed the moment I entered. First surprise, then disbelief, then something close to betrayal. Mom. I stopped. Hello, Ryan. He looked at William. What is she doing here? William remained calm. Arya is here to answer questions about Moore Building Systems and Sterling's history. I thought this meeting was about Atlantic. It is. Ryan pushed his chair back slightly. This is unnecessary. One board member, a woman named Ellen Foster, spoke. We'll determine what's necessary, Mr. Moore. Ryan sat still. I hated seeing him like that. but I reminded myself why I was there. Not to condemn him, not to save him, to tell the truth. William pulled out a chair. I sat. Ellen thanked me for coming. We understand this is an unusual situation. That's one word for it. A few people smiled. Ryan didn't. Ellen continued. We've already established that you did not authorize your son to represent that you would provide access to Atlantic Regional Health Network. That's correct. And you're not involved in Sterling's proposal, no. Have you contacted anyone at Atlantic regarding Sterling, no? Do you intend to not on Sterling's behalf? She nodded. Thank you. I thought that might be the end. Then another board member asked Mrs. Moore, can you explain your history with Sterling? I looked toward William. You're probably better qualified. He shook his head. I'd like them to hear your version. I folded my hands. 20 years ago, Sterling was much smaller. William smiled. That's generous. How small, small enough that Charles called it, that Bennett fellow and 3 trucks. Several people laughed. Even Ryan almost smiled. I continued. Moore Building Systems had been operating for years by then. We weren't enormous, but we were established. What happened with Sterling? I looked at William. His expression had changed. He remembered. Sterling lost a major contract, I said. A commercial portfolio representing a large percentage of its revenue. William nodded. 32%. The room became quieter. The bank reduced Sterling's credit line, I continued. Suppliers shortened payment terms. A couple of customers became nervous. One board member looked surprised. I wasn't aware the company came that close. You weren't here, William said. Most people in this building weren't. I remembered that winter clearly. William had come to our office carrying a folder and trying not to look desperate. Sterling needed subcontract work. Charles did not want to give it to them. They're unstable, he told me after William left. If they go under, we'll eat every invoice. Charles wasn't cruel. He was protecting our company. We had 83 employees then. 83 families depended on us making sensible decisions. But I had seen something in William. Not confidence, character. He had brought every financial statement Charles requested. He admitted exactly how bad things were. He didn't pretend. He didn't exaggerate. He simply asked for a chance. A week later, Moore Building Systems won a large facilities project in Hanover County. We needed subcontractors. Charles had 3 companies in mind. Sterling wasn't one of them. I argued with him for 2 nights, I told the board. William laughed. Only 2, Charles was stubborn. So were you, he said. That's why we stayed married. A few smiles moved around the table. Then Ellen asked, why did you choose Sterling? Because William told us the truth when lying would have made his company look stronger. William lowered his eyes. I continued. I told Charles that if a man was willing to show us exactly how vulnerable his business was, I trusted him more than someone pretending everything was fine. Ryan was staring at me. I wondered whether he understood the irony. We gave Sterling a portion of the Hanover work, I said. Not enough to endanger our company, but enough to matter. William spoke then. It kept 26 people employed. The room went silent. He looked around the table. What Arya isn't telling you is that Moore Building Systems also extended our payment terms. I shook my head. That was Charles. No. Charles said no. I smiled despite myself. That sounds like him. You convinced him. William looked directly at the board. Most subcontractors wanted payment protections we couldn't meet. Arya structured terms that gave us enough breathing room to complete the work before our receivables came in. One man asked, and that stabilized Sterling? No, William said. It gave us time to stabilize ourselves. That distinction mattered, exactly as I had hoped. I hadn't saved Sterling. I had opened a door. William and his people had walked through it. He continued. We completed the Hanover project. That performance helped us win 2 additional contracts. Within 18 months, our credit situation improved. He looked toward me. Without that first opportunity, there is a very real possibility Sterling would not exist today. Ryan's face had lost all color. I wanted to tell William to stop. Not because anything he said was untrue, because I could see the weight landing on my son. The Buick, the laughter, the corporate dinner, the pioneer introduction. All of it was rearranging itself in his mind. Ryan finally spoke. Why didn't I know this? The question was directed at me. I answered honestly. Because it wasn't a family legend. What does that mean? It means your father and I didn't spend dinner telling stories about people who owed us something. William nodded slowly. We never considered Sterling indebted to us. Ryan looked at him. But you knew who she was immediately. Of course I did. Why? William leaned back. Because there are people you remember for what they gave you. He paused. And people you remember because of how they treated you when you had nothing useful to give them. No one moved. William looked at me. Your mother belonged to the second group. My eyes burned. I glanced down. Then Ryan asked the question I knew had been haunting him since the parking lot. Is that why you opened her car door? William looked almost confused. Then he understood. Yes, Ryan swallowed. Because of the business relationship number. William's answer came immediately. Because I respect her. The silence that followed was painful. William continued more gently. Ryan, I didn't open your mother's door because she has money. Ryan stared at the table. I didn't do it because she knows people at Atlantic. Still no response. And I certainly didn't do it because of what car she was driving. Ryan closed his eyes. I opened the door because 20 years ago, when my company looked like a bad bet, your mother judged me by my character instead of my circumstances. I could barely breathe. The memory of Ryan laughing beside the Buick returned. That Buick is older than half the interns in this building. I looked at my son. He seemed smaller somehow. Not humiliated, stripped of something. An illusion, perhaps. The belief that status created respect. William turned back to the board. That is the history. Ellen thanked me. Then she said the portion requiring my presence was complete. I stood. Ryan looked up. Mom. I stopped. For a moment I thought he might apologize. Instead he asked, Are you leaving? Yes. He looked almost frightened. What happens now? I glanced toward William. That isn't my decision. Then I looked back at my son. And it shouldn't be. I walked out of the boardroom. William's assistant escorted me downstairs. When I reached the parking lot, the Buick sat exactly where I had left it. Old, faded, ordinary. I ran my hand across the roof before opening the door. For years, Ryan had believed respect came from looking as though you belonged in important rooms. That morning, he learned his mother had once helped build the room he was desperate to rise inside. But I knew something he did not yet understand. That revelation would not save his promotion. If anything, it had made the board's decision harder. Because now they knew Ryan had never needed to borrow my reputation. He had only needed to earn his own. Ryan did not call me after the board meeting. Not that afternoon. Not that evening. Not the next morning. I told myself that was probably for the best. There are moments when a mother wants desperately to hear her child's voice, even when she knows there is nothing useful either of them can say. Wednesday passed, then Thursday. By Friday, I had checked my phone so many times that I finally put it in a kitchen drawer and went outside to work in the garden. I lasted 19 minutes. When I came back inside, there was a missed call. Not Ryan. William. I stared at his name before calling back. He answered immediately. Aria, is it done? He knew what I meant. Yes. I sat down. What happened? I need to be careful about what I tell you. I understand. Ryan is still employed at Sterling. My shoulders dropped slightly. I hadn't realized how tense I was until that moment. Thank you. Don't thank me. Keeping him wasn't a favor. That was exactly what I needed to hear. William continued. The review found no fraud, no fabricated documents, and no evidence that Ryan contacted Atlantic while falsely representing himself as speaking for you. I closed my eyes. Good. But the board did find that some of the language he used was misleading. I expected that. He allowed internal stakeholders to believe the Moore family relationships were more available to Sterling than they actually were. I said nothing. The board considers that poor judgment. And the promotion, William paused. He's no longer being considered for vice president. There it was. A sentence my son had spent months building his life around. Gone. I thought I would feel relief. Instead, I felt grief. Not because the decision was unfair, because I knew exactly how deeply it would wound Ryan. What about Atlantic? Rebecca Collins is taking over leadership of the proposal. Ryan. He'll remain on the account team in a supporting role if he chooses. If he chooses, he's angry. I imagine so. William was silent for a moment. Then he said, Arya, I know he's your son, but he was being considered for executive leadership. At that level, judgment matters as much as sales numbers. I know. If we promoted him after this, we'd be telling everyone else that results excuse how you create them. You don't have to convince me. Maybe I'm convincing myself. That surprised me. You like him? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. He's talented. He works hard. Clients generally trust him. I wouldn't be disappointed if I thought he had nothing more in him. That comforted me more than William probably knew. What happens now? That depends on Ryan. After we ended the call, I stood at the kitchen window. The Buick sat beneath the maple tree. I remembered Ryan at 16 learning to drive in that car. Charles had been terrified. Not that he admitted it. Smooth on the brake, he kept saying. Ryan slammed it so hard once that Charles's coffee hit the windshield. I laughed until I cried. Those memories made it difficult to hold the 41-year-old man responsible for his choices without also seeing the boy he had been. But perhaps that was part of my problem. Ryan called that evening. His voice was flat. I assume William told you. He told me you're still employed and no longer being considered for vice president. Rebecca got the Atlantic lead. Yes. Congratulations. I frowned. For what you won. My chest tightened. This was never a contest between us. It sure feels like one. I didn't choose Rebecca. You didn't have to. Ryan, you walked into that boardroom and told them a story that made me look like an entitled idiot. I answered their questions. You made yourself look like some kind of hero. That hurt. I spent most of that meeting explaining that William saved his own company. You knew what would happen. No, I didn't. But you knew it could cost me the promotion. Yes. Silence. Then you did it anyway. I closed my eyes. Yes. He laughed bitterly. At least you admit it. I told the truth anyway. That distinction probably feels very noble from where you're sitting. I'm not trying to feel noble. Good. He hung up. I cried afterward. I wish I could say I felt strong. I didn't. Boundaries sound clean when people talk about them after the fact. Living through one can feel like tearing your own heart in half while everyone tells you it is healthy. For the next 3 weeks, Ryan disappeared from my life. No Sunday calls, no texts, no photographs of the grandchildren. Claire responded politely when I messaged her, but I could sense tension behind every sentence. I did not push. At Sterling, things continued without me. William called once to tell me Atlantic had decided to keep Sterling in the final round. That mattered. It meant my refusal to participate had not destroyed the company's opportunity. Sterling's proposal could stand on its own. Ryan could have stood on his own too. That realization made the entire situation sadder. A week later, I ran into Rebecca at a non-profit event. She approached cautiously. I hope it's okay that I say hello. Of course. She looked tired. Atlantic. She smiled. Atlantic. I remember those proposals. Then you understand the lack of sleep. I do. She hesitated. Ryan helped me with a technical section yesterday. That surprised me. Voluntarily. More or less. I laughed. Rebecca lowered her voice. He's angry, but he's still doing the work. Good. I thought you might want to know. I did. Very much. That evening, however, William told me about a conversation he'd had with Ryan. I probably shouldn't repeat it, he said. Then don't. He chuckled. You always were difficult. So Charles said. William grew serious. Ryan asked me whether losing the promotion was because you refused to support him. My stomach tightened. What did you say? The truth. I waited. I told him, your mother's reputation opened a door. Your choices closed it. I closed my eyes. William, He needed to hear it. Maybe. He also needed to understand that if you had called me and begged me to promote him, the answer would still have been no. That mattered. More than I expected. Because somewhere inside me, guilt had been whispering that I could have changed the outcome. William took that fantasy away. Ryan had not lost because I refused to save him. Ryan had lost because Sterling had evaluated his judgment and found it insufficient for executive leadership. For now. Do you think he can recover? I asked. Professionally, yes, absolutely. And personally, that's your department. No, I said quietly. I think that's his. William was silent. Then he said, maybe you're right. 3 more days passed. Sunday evening arrived. I made soup and ate alone. At 9:30 the phone rang. Claire. I answered immediately. Claire. For several seconds I heard only breathing. Then Arya. I'm sorry to call this late. Her voice cracked. I don't know what to do. I stood. Are the children okay? Yes, they're upstairs. Are you okay? I'm fine. Where's Ryan? Ryan, another silence. He left. My heart jumped. Left where I don't know. What happened? We had a fight. About Sterling, about everything. Claire began crying, not loudly. The exhausted crying of someone who had been holding herself together for too long. He keeps saying this is temporary, she whispered. That he'll get another promotion, another bonus, another opportunity. But Arya, I don't think we can keep doing this. Doing what? Silence. Then Claire said something that made the pieces click into place. Pretending we can afford our life. I sat down slowly. What do you mean the house? The cars, the school, the club, the credit cards. I remembered Ryan sitting on my sofa. If I lose this, I lose everything. How bad is it? Worse than he told you? My stomach dropped. Claire, I should have said something sooner. How much debt? I'm still adding it up. Those were almost the exact words Ryan had used. I closed my eyes. Where did he go? I think a hotel. Has he been drinking? No. Is he driving safely? Yes. Then let him cool down. Claire sniffed. I told him we have to sell the house. That explained the fight. And he said selling it would make everyone think he failed. There it was again. Not losing the house, being seen losing it. Claire, I said gently, I need you to tell me everything. And she did. The mortgage, the renovation loan, the luxury SUV lease, a second car payment, private school tuition, country club dues, credit cards, the Italy deposits, expenses designed not to build wealth but to display it. By the time Claire finished, I understood something I should have seen years earlier. Ryan had not simply been trying to become successful. He had been spending money to look like the successful man he believed everyone at Sterling expected him to be. And suddenly the old Buick made perfect sense. It wasn't the car Ryan hated. It was what he thought the car told people about him. About where he came from. About the family he had spent years trying to edit out of his story. I listened as Claire cried. Then I looked toward the framed photograph of Charles. The problem was no longer a promotion. It was no longer Atlantic. It wasn't even Sterling. My son had built an entire life around being seen as someone he was terrified he might not actually be. And now that life was beginning to crack. Claire arrived at my house the next morning at 9:30. She looked as though she hadn't slept. Her blonde hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and there were dark circles beneath her eyes. She carried a laptop bag in one hand and a thick folder in the other. I opened the door before she could knock twice. Come in. I'm sorry. For what? For bringing this to you. You called me because you needed someone. That's exactly what Ryan says I shouldn't do. I closed the door behind her. Ryan isn't here. She gave me a tired smile. No, he definitely isn't. I made coffee. Claire spread papers across my kitchen table. Credit card statements, mortgage documents, tuition invoices, vehicle contracts. The numbers were worse when placed together. Not catastrophic. Not yet. Ryan and Claire still had good incomes. They had equity in the house, retirement accounts. No one was facing foreclosure that morning. But they were living with almost no margin. The house payment alone made me uncomfortable. Then there was the renovation loan, the SUV lease, Claire's car payment, private school tuition for 2 children, country club dues, travel, restaurants, clothing, credit cards. What is this? I asked, pointing to a recurring charge. Claire looked embarrassed. Wine storage. I stared at her. We have a membership. You rent space to store wine. Ryan says clients notice what you serve. I leaned back. Charles had once served a hospital administrator beer from a cooler during a broken chiller emergency. We still won the contract. I kept that thought to myself. How long has this been happening? Claire rubbed her forehead. Gradually. The house was the biggest step. You liked your old house. I loved our old house. Then why move? Ryan said we needed more room. For what? Entertaining. I looked around my kitchen. For 30 years, some of our best clients had eaten chili at this table. Claire continued. He said senior executives lived in certain neighborhoods. Their kids went to certain schools. They belonged to certain clubs. And you agreed? At first. She looked ashamed. I liked some of it too, Arya. I don't want to pretend Ryan forced me into everything. That honesty made me respect her. We both enjoyed the nicer house, the vacations. I liked telling people the kids were at St. Catherine's. Then what changed? The bills. I nodded. Reality is irritating that way. Claire laughed despite herself. Then her eyes filled. When the VP position opened, Ryan told me the salary increase would fix everything. How much of an increase? She told me. It was substantial. Not substantial enough. Even with the promotion, they would still have been spending too much. You know this wouldn't have fixed everything. I know. Does Ryan? I think he knows mathematically. That's not what I asked. Claire looked toward the window. No. There was something else. I could feel it. What aren't you telling me? She hesitated. Then she opened the laptop. I started going through our accounts last night. Without Ryan. Their joint accounts. Fair enough. She turned the screen toward me. There was no secret gambling, no hidden mistress, no mysterious wire transfers, just spending. Hundreds of ordinary decisions that had accumulated into an extraordinary problem. A watch, club fees, a business wardrobe, restaurant tabs, a golf weekend, a premium gym membership, furniture bought on financing, travel upgrades, nothing individually shocking. Together they told a story. Ryan was buying admission into a world he thought required proof. I kept asking him to slow down, Claire said. What did he say? That these things were investments in his career. I looked at the statements. Some investment. He genuinely believes it. That was the tragedy. If Ryan had been selfishly spending for pleasure, anger would have been easier. But much of this came from fear. What exactly is he afraid of? Claire was silent for a long time. Then she said, being the poor kid who got lucky. I stared at her. He said that more than once. When usually after company events. She folded her hands. He'd come home talking about somebody whose father owned a law firm, somebody who went to Princeton, somebody with a vacation house in Kiowa, and he'd say he could never let them see him as the poor kid who got lucky. I felt something inside me sink. Ryan wasn't poor. I know. He had everything he needed. I know. But he remembers when we had less. Claire nodded. He remembers enough. I stood and walked toward the window. For years I had thought Ryan's discomfort with our past was ingratitude. Now I saw another layer. Shame. Not shame because Charles and I had done anything wrong. Shame because Ryan had entered rooms where people used wealth as a language and he feared his accent would betray him. Let me tell you something about his father, I said. Claire looked up. When Charles and I got married, we had $412 after paying the first month's rent. She smiled faintly. I didn't know that. Our apartment was above a laundromat. In August, the heat was unbearable. I sat down. Charles worked HVAC during the day. At night, he repaired anything anyone would pay him to repair. Ryan told the kids Grandpa owned a company. He did eventually. I pointed toward the table, but not at first. I told Claire about the kitchen table bookkeeping, about the green ledger, about postponing grocery shopping because 3 customers paid late, about Charles coming home with burned hands, About the winter. Our furnace failed, and he repaired it with salvaged parts because we couldn't afford a new unit. Claire listened quietly. We weren't ashamed, I said. We were tired, sometimes frightened, occasionally broke, but never ashamed. I think Ryan was. The voice came from behind me. I turned. Ryan stood in the doorway between the kitchen and hallway. I hadn't heard the front door. Claire froze. How long have you been there? Long enough? He looked terrible. Same clothes as the night before. He didn't seem angry. That worried me more. Claire stood. Ryan, I'm not here to fight. His eyes moved toward the financial statements. He gave a humorless laugh. Family audit. No, I said. Your wife was scared. His face tightened. I know. Where did you sleep? Hotel? Did you sleep? Not much. He walked toward the table. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Ryan picked up one of the credit card statements. I thought the promotion would give us room. Claire shook her head. No. It would have given us permission to keep doing the same thing. He looked at her. She held his gaze. That sentence landed. Ryan sat down. I didn't realize it had gotten this bad. Claire's voice was gentle. I've been telling you. I know. No, you've been hearing me. That's different. Ryan looked down. I almost intervened. Old habit. Smooth the conflict. Protect everyone. I stopped myself. This was their marriage. Their conversation. After a moment, Ryan said, I'm sorry. Claire began crying. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. Then Ryan looked at me. So what happens now? You tell me. I don't know. That's probably a better place to start than pretending you do. He gave me a tired look. You always have an answer. No. I spent 30 years making people believe I did. That surprised him. Your father and I were scared plenty of times. You never looked scared. We had children and employees watching us. We got good at hiding it. Ryan looked toward the window. I remember Dad coming home in those blue work shirts. I smiled. He hated those shirts. I hated when he picked me up from school wearing them. There it was. Claire squeezed his hand. Ryan continued. One of the boys asked if Dad was the janitor. What did you say? That he owned a company. You were what, 12, 13? Why does that still matter? Ryan shook his head. I don't know. But he did. We all did. That 13-year-old boy had entered corporate America and never stopped trying to make sure nobody mistook his father for the janitor again. So he bought the suit, the SUV, the house, the club membership. He edited the family story until there were no work boots left in it. And then he laughed at the Buick. Not because it was unreliable, because it carried the same message those blue work shirts had carried when he was 13. We came from people who worked with their hands. Ryan looked at me. I thought if people knew where I came from, they'd think I didn't belong. My throat tightened. Ryan, where you came from is the reason you do belong. He looked away. Easy for you to say. No. I leaned forward. Your father repaired boilers before he owned a company. I did bookkeeping at a kitchen table before I negotiated hospital contracts. I pointed toward the statements. We didn't become successful by pretending those years never happened. Ryan was quiet. You were ashamed, I said gently, of the very things that should have made you proud. His eyes filled. He blinked quickly. For once he didn't argue. Claire rested her head against his shoulder. I looked at them and felt something I hadn't felt since the parking lot. Hope. Not because the problem was solved, the debt remained, the promotion was gone, trust still needed repair. But Ryan had finally stopped defending the image. He was looking at the truth. That afternoon, he and Claire went home together. I didn't offer money. I didn't offer to call William. I didn't offer solutions. 2 days later, just after breakfast, I looked through the front window and saw Ryan standing in my driveway. He wasn't walking toward the house. I was standing beside the Buick. One hand rested on the faded roof. I stepped outside. Ryan. He turned. His eyes were red. Then he looked at the passenger door. Mom. Yes. Can we sit in Dad's car? For a moment I simply looked at Ryan. He stood beside the Buick with one hand resting on the faded silver roof. 6 weeks earlier, he had laughed at that same car in front of his coworkers. Now he looked almost afraid to touch it. "Can we sit in Dad's car?" he asked again. I nodded. Of course. I unlocked it. Ryan walked around to the passenger side. That mattered to me. He could have taken the driver's seat. He had driven the Buick dozens of times as a teenager. But he chose Charles's seat. I sat behind the wheel. When I closed the door, the familiar smell surrounded me. Old leather fabric and the faint trace of the pine air fresheners Charles used to buy in packs of 10. Ryan ran his fingers across the dashboard. Dad glued this. I looked at the narrow crack near the glove compartment. Twice. He said replacing the whole panel was a scam. Your father considered almost everything a scam if he thought he could repair it himself. Ryan smiled. A real smile. Small, but real. Height taught me to drive in this car. I remember. You remember when I hit the brake, your father's coffee hit the windshield. Ryan laughed. I thought he was going to kill me. He was more upset about the coffee. The laughter faded. Silence filled the car. But it was not an uncomfortable silence. It felt crowded with memory. Charles sitting beside me. Ryan in the back seat as a boy. Family vacations, grocery bags, soccer equipment, hospital visits, funerals. Ordinary days. A life. Ryan stared through the windshield. I've been thinking about what you said. That usually gets me in trouble. He didn't smile this time. About being ashamed of the things I should have been proud of. I waited. I think you were right. It would have been easy to say I know. I didn't. Ryan rubbed his hands together. I don't know when it started. Yes, you do. He looked at me. The blue shirts. That's one place. He nodded. When Dad picked me up from school. The boy who asked if he was the janitor. Ryan looked surprised. You remember you told me that day. I did. You were furious. I barely remember telling you. Mothers remember things children get to forget. He leaned back. I was so embarrassed. Your father knew. Ryan turned sharply. He knew, of course. Did he say anything to me? What I looked at the steering wheel. He said the boy's at that age where he thinks everybody's looking at him. Ryan lowered his eyes. He wasn't angry. Charles, I smiled. He was hurt. That was harder for Ryan to hear. I saw it. He never told me. He didn't want you carrying his feelings around. Ryan swallowed. That somehow makes it worse. Probably. He looked through the windshield again. I spent years telling myself I'd gotten over it. But you hadn't. No. He exhaled slowly. When I started at Sterling, everyone seemed to come from somewhere better. Better, you know what I mean. I want to hear what you mean. He thought about it. One guy's father was a federal judge. Another woman went to Yale. Somebody had a family place in Nantucket. People talked about skiing in Aspen like they were talking about going to Target. I almost laughed. Ryan continued. I started feeling like if people knew too much about me, they'd realize I didn't belong. So you gave them less to know, at first, and then I gave them a better story. That was painfully honest. What was the better story, the self-made one? I nodded. Poor kid. Working-class parents. No connections. Built everything himself. He winced hearing me say it. I never meant to make you and Dad sound like failures. You didn't. I made you sound small. Yes. He looked at me. I'm sorry. There was no defense attached, no explanation, just the words. I waited. Ryan's eyes filled. I'm sorry I laughed at the Buick. My throat tightened. I'm sorry I did it in front of everyone. I saw the car and all I could think about was what they would think of me. He looked down. I didn't think about what it would do to you. Thank you. I'm sorry I used the Moore name in the proposal. I said nothing. I kept telling myself I wasn't lying because I never guaranteed anything. That's what you told me. I know. He rubbed his face. But I wanted them to assume. There it was. The truth without decoration. I wanted them to think I had access. I wanted William and the board to see something Rebecca couldn't offer. And did you think I would make the introductions? Ryan nodded. Yes. Why, his answer came quietly. Because you always did. Charles's letter returned to me. Every time we move something out of his way, he learns the obstacle shouldn't have been there. I helped create that expectation, I said. Ryan looked at me. What, I should have let you struggle more. That's a strange thing for a mother to apologize for. Maybe. I looked at him. But I loved being useful to you. His face softened. I'd make the call, write the check, introduce you to someone. Your problem disappeared and I got to feel like I had protected my son. You were helping. Sometimes. And sometimes I was making sure you never learned whether you could open the door yourself. Ryan was quiet. Then he said Dad knew, didn't he? I hesitated. Yes. I told him about the letter. Not every word. Some things Charles wrote belonged to me. But I shared the part that mattered. Your father worried that what we built would become proof in your mind that you deserved things you hadn't earned. Ryan closed his eyes. That sounds like Dad. He also wrote that you were smart, hardworking, and a good man. Ryan opened his eyes. He did, yes. He still thought I was a good man. He never stopped. Ryan looked away quickly. I gave him time. Finally, he said, I don't feel like one. Good people can behave badly. That sounds convenient. It isn't. Bad behavior still has consequences. He nodded. The promotion. Yes. Claire says the same thing. Claire is smarter than both of us. That's probably true. We smiled. Then I asked, what are you going to do about Sterling about all of it? Ryan took a long breath. We're selling the SUV. I nodded. Country Club is gone. Good. We're canceling Italy. Also good. We're probably moving the kids after the school year. That will be difficult. I know. And the house. He hesitated. We're talking to someone about selling. That was harder. I could see it. Are you worried what people will think? Yes. I appreciated the honesty. But I'm starting to realize the people whose opinions I've been financing don't pay my mortgage. I laughed. Now that sounds like your father. Ryan smiled. Then his expression became serious. I'm also going to apologize to my team. That may be the hardest one. I know. And Rebecca, I owe her one too. Probably. He looked at me. Are you going to call William? There it was. For a second my heart sank. Then Ryan shook his head. No. Sorry. That came out wrong. I waited. I mean, please don't. I blinked. I don't want you asking him to reconsider anything. You don't? No. That was the moment I knew something had changed. Not because Ryan was suddenly healed, not because shame had disappeared, but because for the first time, he wasn't asking me to remove the consequence. If I ever get another shot, he said, I want to know it was mine. I reached across the console and took his hand, then earn it. He nodded. We sat quietly for another minute. Then Ryan touched the dashboard. Mom. Yes. Why did you really keep this car? I thought about it. For a long time I thought it was because it made me feel close to your father. And now I think it reminds me where we came from. Ryan looked around the worn interior. I spent my whole life trying to get away from that. Maybe you were trying to get away from the wrong thing. He nodded. When we finally got out, Ryan walked toward the house with me. Before stepping inside, he turned and looked back at the Buick. There was no embarrassment on his face, only recognition. It would take months for me to learn whether my son's apology could survive inconvenience, sacrifice, and disappointment. Words are easy in a quiet driveway. Change is proven elsewhere. But for the first time since this began, Ryan had asked me for nothing. No money, no introduction, no phone call, no rescue. He had only asked to sit beside me in his father's old car and tell the truth. And for that morning it was enough. 6 months later, Ryan no longer drove the black luxury SUV. The first time I noticed, he arrived at my house in a 3-year-old Honda Accord. I was watering the hydrangeas when he pulled into the driveway. I looked at the car, then at him, then back at the car. Ryan got out carrying a grocery bag. Go ahead. Go ahead with what, say something. I turned off the hose. I was going to say it's a nice car. You were going to say something about character development. I hadn't gotten that far. He laughed. That sound had changed too. 6 months earlier, Ryan's laughter had been something he used defensively to control a room before the room could judge him. Now it sounded lighter. He held up the bag. Claire sent banana bread. Then I forgive everything. I knew food would work. Change had not happened dramatically. There was no single morning when Ryan woke up transformed. Real change rarely behaves that way. It came through uncomfortable decisions. The SUV went first. Ryan and Claire ended the lease early and absorbed a penalty that made him complain for 3 straight days. The country club membership followed. That one hurt his pride more than his bank account. He had to call a man he frequently golfed with and explain that he was leaving. "What did you tell him?" I asked afterward. The truth, which was that we were cutting expenses. And he said, "Smart. That place is ridiculously expensive." I stared at him. Ryan shook his head. "I know. For years he had been spending money because he assumed people were watching. When he finally stopped, he discovered most of them weren't. The Italy trip was cancelled. They lost part of the deposit." Claire said losing the money hurt less than spending thousands more because they were afraid to admit the trip had become irresponsible. The children stayed at their private school through the end of the academic year. Then Ryan and Claire enrolled them in a well-regarded public school closer to home. That decision caused the most anxiety. Not for the children. For Ryan. He worried they would feel punished. He worried friends would ask questions. He worried parents at Sterling would notice. The children adjusted within weeks. His daughter joined the school orchestra. His son discovered that his best friend from soccer already attended there. Children, I learned again, are often less attached to our status symbols than adults imagine. The house was more complicated. Ryan and Claire met with a financial planner and a real estate agent. For the time being, they decided not to sell. With the other expenses reduced, they could manage the mortgage while rebuilding savings. It was not the dramatic collapse Ryan had feared. It was budgeting. Humbling, perhaps, but survivable. Sterling was harder. On his first Monday after our conversation in the Buick, Ryan asked for 15 minutes at the end of a team meeting. He told me about it later. I apologized. To whom? Everyone. "What did you say?" "That I had overstated the strategic value of some family relationships and put the team in a position where assumptions were being made that I hadn't earned the right to make." I nodded, and I told them Rebecca deserved their full support. That must have hurt. It did. I appreciated that answer more than if he had pretended otherwise. Growth did not require Ryan to stop wanting the promotion. It required him to stop believing wanting it justified everything he had done. Rebecca remained in charge of the Atlantic proposal. For the first few weeks, Ryan struggled. She had the role he wanted. She attended meetings he once expected to lead. Her name appeared first on documents. Sometimes he came home furious. But he did not undermine her. Instead, he helped. He reviewed technical sections. He coordinated site data. He stayed late twice to help resolve inconsistencies in cost projections. He gave Rebecca a contact, not one of mine, but someone he had built a relationship with himself. And when the proposal was presented to senior leadership, he did something that would have been almost impossible for the Ryan I knew 6 months earlier. He sat in the room without trying to make himself the center of it. Rebecca noticed. So did William. Sterling eventually won a substantial portion of the Atlantic Regional Health Network contract. Not the entire $38 million. Another firm received part of the work. But Sterling secured enough to make the effort a major success. William called me afterward. "You'll be pleased to know nobody needed your address book. I was hoping you'd manage without an elderly widow saving the corporation." He laughed. "We struggled." "How did Ryan do?" There was a pause. "Better. Not excellent. Not transformed. Better." I trusted that word. "Is he getting promoted?" "No." I smiled. "Good." William sounded surprised. "Good. If you promoted him immediately, he might decide personal growth has a quarterly bonus attached." William laughed. "I knew there was a reason I liked you." Ryan received no promotion, no special title, no executive office. Instead, William assigned him responsibility for a smaller regional account that had been underperforming. Ryan told me about it over dinner. "It's not glamorous. Then you should be perfect for it." He gave me a look. Was that an old Buick joke? It might have been. The account required exactly what Ryan had spent years trying to avoid. Unremarkable work, client calls, service failures, budget problems, operations meetings, no impressive cocktail parties, no powerful connections, just performance. He threw himself into it, not because he had stopped being ambitious. Ryan was still Ryan, but ambition had become quieter. One Thursday morning in October he called. Are you busy tomorrow? At my age, that depends how exciting you think grocery shopping is. Come have lunch with me. Where, Sterling? I paused. At the office. Yes. The last time I had been there, I walked into a board meeting my son never expected to see me in. You sure? I'm sure. What's the occasion? No occasion. That interested me. Who'll be there, people? That's wonderfully specific. Mom. I smiled. All right. Come around noon. I will. We were about to hang up when I had an impulse. Ryan. Yeah, should I take the Buick? Silence. For half a second the old wound returned. Then Ryan said quietly, I hope you do. I didn't answer immediately. Mom, I'm here. You okay? Yes. And I was. The next morning I washed the Buick. Not because it needed to impress anyone, because Charles would have. I cleaned the windshield, wiped the dashboard, and vacuumed the floor mats. The old silver paint still showed its age. I left it that way. At 11:30, I put on a simple green blouse, comfortable slacks, and the pearl earrings Charles gave me. Then I drove toward Sterling. The weather was beautiful. Cool autumn air moved through the cracked window. As I approached the office complex, I felt my stomach tighten. Memories returned. Ryan's laughter. That Buick is older than half the interns in this building. William opening my door. The faces around us. Humiliation leaves a strange memory in the body. Even after forgiveness begins, part of you remembers exactly where you were standing when someone made you feel small. I turned into Sterling's circular drive. For a moment the scene looked almost identical. Several employees stood outside near the entrance. Rebecca was there. So were two men I recognized from previous visits. And Ryan. He was standing near the top of the stone steps. He saw the Buick immediately. I slowed. 6 months earlier, I had watched embarrassment cross his face from almost the same distance. This time his expression changed differently. He smiled. Not nervously, not performatively. He simply smiled. I stopped at the curb. The engine idled. Rebecca noticed me and lifted one hand. One of the men beside her said something to Ryan. I couldn't hear it through the glass. Ryan answered. Then he started walking down the steps. For 1 second, an old instinct made me brace myself. I hated that. I hated that some small part of me still remembered the laugh before anything else. But Ryan didn't laugh. He didn't look around to see who was watching. He didn't glance at the Buick with embarrassment. He walked directly toward the driver's side. Then he reached for my door. I froze. Ryan opened it. Hey, Mom. I looked up at him. Hello? He offered his hand. I took it and stepped out. Behind him, Rebecca was watching. So were the others. Ryan didn't seem to care. He closed the door carefully. For a moment, his palm remained on the faded silver roof. Then he turned toward the people standing near the entrance. 6 months earlier, William Bennett had opened this door because he remembered who I had been when his company needed help. Now my son had opened it for an entirely different reason. Not because I could help his career. Not because my name carried weight. Not because he had discovered I knew important people. He opened it because I was his mother. We began walking toward the building. Then one of Ryan's coworkers smiled and asked, So this is the famous Buick? Ryan stopped. I looked at him. So did everyone else. For a brief moment I wondered which Ryan would answer. The man who had once been ashamed of where he came from, or the man who had spent 6 months learning that respect could not be financed, borrowed, or inherited. Ryan looked at the Buick, then at me, and the smile on his face told me I was finally about to find out. So this is the famous Buick. The question came from a man standing beside Rebecca near Sterling's front entrance. 6 months earlier, those words would have tightened every muscle in Ryan's face. I knew because I had seen it happen. I had watched my son look at that car and see everything he feared other people might think about him. Old, ordinary, working class. Not impressive enough. Now Ryan glanced back at the Buick and smiled. The one and only. The man laughed. Ryan says his dad kept that thing running forever. He did, I said. 22 years, Ryan added. And if you asked Dad, he would have told you it was just getting broken in. I laughed. That sounds like him. Ryan turned toward the small group. Then he put one hand lightly on my shoulder. This is my mother. There was no performance in his voice, no exaggerated pride, no mention of more building systems, no Atlantic Regional Health Network, no story about William Bennett, just my mother. Rebecca smiled. We've met. I know. Ryan looked at the others. And if you ever wonder where I learned to work, start with her. I couldn't speak for a moment. It was such a simple sentence. 6 months earlier, I might have wanted more. I might have wanted Ryan to tell them about the contracts I negotiated, the company Charles and I built, the people we employed, the organizations I advised. I might have wanted the people who laughed that first day to understand exactly how wrong they had been. But standing there, I realized I didn't need any of that. Ryan wasn't correcting their opinion of me. He was correcting his own. That mattered more. Come on, he said. Lunch is upstairs. As we walked toward the building, I glanced through the glass doors. William stood in the lobby. He had apparently witnessed the entire scene. Our eyes met. He smiled. Then, without making a spectacle of it, he gave me a small nod. I returned it. Nothing more needed to be said. Lunch was in a conference room overlooking the trees surrounding the office park. There were sandwiches, salad, iced tea, and absolutely no chandeliers. Charles would have approved. Rebecca joined us for part of the meal. So did 2 members of Ryan's account team. I noticed something almost immediately. Ryan listened. That sounds insignificant until you have known someone who spent years preparing his next sentence while everyone else was still speaking. One of his younger colleagues explained a problem with a regional client. Ryan asked questions. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to turn the conversation into proof of his expertise. He simply listened. After the others left, Ryan and I remained by the window. So I said, "How is the glamorous world of underperforming regional accounts?" He smiled. Painfully unglamorous. Good. You really enjoy this. A little. He shook his head. Then his expression became serious. We're doing better. The account. That too. He looked out the window. Claire and me. I'm glad. We paid off one of the cards. That's wonderful. 3 more to go, one at a time. He nodded. We decided to stay in the house for now. Claire told me. She talks to you too much. She married into the wrong family if she wanted privacy. That made him laugh. Then he leaned against the table. William gave me another account. I heard. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Of course you did. He didn't tell me much. It's smaller. Does that bother you? Yes. His honesty made me smile, but not the way it would have before. How does it bother you now I still want more? There's nothing wrong with wanting more. I know. He looked at me. I just don't want to become that person again, trying to get it. I understood. Then don't. You make everything sound simple. No, I make it sound short. He laughed, then grew quiet. I thought Dad would be disappointed in me. The words surprised me. Why? Because of everything. Your father was disappointed in you plenty of times. Ryan stared at me. I smiled. He was your father, not a saint. That's comforting. He also never stopped believing in you. Ryan looked down. I thought of Charles's letter, the warning, the love beneath it. Your father would be proud of what you're doing now. Ryan didn't answer immediately. Then he said softly, I hope someday I earn that. I reached across the table and touched his hand. You're earning it now. When I left Sterling that afternoon, Ryan walked me back to the Buick. He opened the door again. You know, I said if you keep doing this, people are going to think you were raised properly. Let's not ruin my reputation. I drove home smiling. Life became quieter after that. There were no dramatic promotions, no sudden fortune, no miraculous disappearance of Ryan's debt. He and Claire kept working through it. Sterling kept giving him opportunities. Rebecca continued doing well with Atlantic. William did not reward Ryan simply because Ryan had learned a lesson. I was grateful for that. Redemption should not be another transaction. Then several months later, the Buick finally gave me a reason to reconsider our relationship. I was driving home from the grocery store when the steering began to feel wrong. Nothing dramatic happened. I slowed down, pulled into a shopping center, and called my mechanic. The diagnosis wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough. Steering components, suspension work, several other repairs that had been approaching for years. My mechanic, a man named Frank, who had known Charles, removed his glasses and looked at me. "Aria, I can fix it. But I think Charles would tell you to stop being stubborn." I smiled. "Charles would tell you to fix it for half the price." Frank laughed. That too. For the first time, I accepted that keeping the Buick on the road was becoming more sentimental than sensible. So I bought a new car. Nothing extravagant. A comfortable, safe crossover. When Ryan saw it, he walked around it approvingly. "Look at you. Don't get excited. Leather seats. I'm still allowed small luxuries. What are you doing with the Buick? I haven't decided." I had considered selling it. Frank knew a young mechanic who liked older Buicks. I also considered donating it to a vocational program. Ryan became strangely quiet. "What, nothing? You have the same face you had when you were 10 and wanted something." He looked toward the driveway. "Can I have it?" I thought I had misheard him. "The Buick. Yes, the car you spent years trying to get me to throw away." "I never said throw away. You called it a fossil." "That was affectionate." "No, it wasn't." He smiled. Then he became serious. "I want it." Why? Ryan walked toward the Buick. He ran his hand along the roof exactly where Charles used to rest his hand after washing it. "I want to fix it. You know that could cost more than it's worth." "I know." "Those words coming from you are deeply confusing." He laughed. "I'm serious." I stepped beside him. "Why?" He looked through the windshield. "Because Dad taught me to drive in it." I waited. "And because someday I want to teach the kids. In this, if I can keep it safe." He touched the hood. "I want them to know what it was. A Buick, no." He looked at me. What it meant. My throat tightened. Ryan continued. "I want them to know Grandpa drove it when he was building the company. He bought it after the company was already doing well. You know what I mean." "I do. I want them to know you kept driving it even when you could afford something 10 times more expensive. That may simply prove your mother is cheap. Dad would call it disciplined. He would." Ryan smiled. Then he said quietly, "I want them to know I was stupid enough to be embarrassed by it." I looked at him. "You don't have to tell them that." "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because that's the important part." His eyes met mine. "I want them to understand you can spend years running away from where you came from and still end up needing to go back before you understand who you are." For a moment I could not speak. Then I reached into my purse. The Buick key was attached to an old brass keyring Charles had used for years. I removed it. Ryan opened his hand. I placed the key in his palm. His fingers closed around it. "No laughing at the upholstery," I said. "No promises. And Charles will haunt you if you skip oil changes. I'm more worried about you. You should be." Ryan hugged me. A real hug. The kind adult children sometimes forget their mothers still need. Over his shoulder, I looked at the faded silver Buick. That car had carried my husband home after 14-hour workdays. It had carried Ryan to driving lessons. It had carried groceries, Christmas presents, hospital bags, grandchildren, grief and memories. Then for one painful afternoon, it had carried my son's shame. But that was no longer the ending of its story. The Buick had never been valuable because of what someone would pay for it. And neither was I. William Bennett opening my door had shocked Ryan because he thought respect followed status. What he eventually learned was something Charles had understood all along. Real respect remembers character. Real success does not require you to erase where you started. And real love does not always open every door for someone. Sometimes love stands back and lets them learn how to open it themselves. I watched my son walk toward his father's old car with the key in his hand. 6 months earlier, he had laughed because he was ashamed to be seen beside it. Now he was asking me to let him keep it. Not because the Buick had changed, because he had. And that more than any promotion title expected,